And we're here. Turn down this jazz music. Bye bye, jazz. Alright, we're here. It's Friday. An exciting time. We're here to talk about
I cannot see you.
Ozu-san.
Ozu-san.
Ozu-san and Mizoguchi-san.
There we go. Oh no.
Oh, start virtual camera. That'll do it. There we go. There we go. Everything's working. And the logo's even going, by God. I did manage after last week to get it down to a reasonable size.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes.
And the stream appears to be not stuttering like last week. This is unprecedented.
I think I got my myself fixed up here. I think it was my fault because of my interneting.
No, that wouldn't make sense why the whole stream was lagging. Like that would only make sense if you were the only one lagging.
You know what? I've been proved wrong once again. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got any off-topic film news of interest.
Jesus, every time before we start this, I tell myself like 2 hours before, I'm like, go look at the Hollywood Reporter, see if there's anything. And then I always forget because I eat, and food is my most important thing.
Well, I don't think there is really. I mean,
no, it's
just depressing and it's not worth talking about.
Yeah, it's been a highly political week, let's say.
Yeah. Alvy started teasing me because of the whole me cursing a lot thing, and then we both realized pretty much simultaneously that the reason I was cursing so much in the CGI video was because it was just a topic that makes me very angry.
That makes sense. Speaking to our topic last week, I found out a friend of mine, a director in China, is actually working on a TV show that's being produced by Wong Kar-wai.
Oh, really?
Wong Kar-wai, yeah. Oh, wait, I don't know if I should be talking about that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I didn't say anything that can be bad. But he's a buddy of mine, yeah. I did a short film. I acted in a short film for him many moons ago.
Huh.
And yeah, he's one of the few directors that was asked to do it, a very prestigious thing. So congrats to that guy. I won't say his name because it's probably not out yet. But yeah.
It's a film, is it? Or a series?
No, I think it's a series. I'm assuming a limited series of some sort.
Nice.
Yeah. I wish I knew that last week. I could have name dropped.
Something to keep your eyes out for anyway.
Yeah, see what that looks like. I bet it'll be fun.
I'm trying to constantly improve my background here, and I got this little colorful humidifier going, but I'm blocking it, and I'm not really bothered finding a better position for it. So
my whole aesthetic is the same. It's plain, two different colors, both faded and old, with a bed from IKEA and this weird butterfly thing. So that's my aesthetic.
I like it.
There you go. Yeah, and a towel behind me.
Well, you have this great day to night cycle thing going on.
I do.
That happens during the stream. It's very exciting.
You watch the time go by, and isn't sunrise, sunset. Talking about Mr. Ozu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's really much film stuff to talk about besides these two guys, and plus they're fairly hefty subjects in and of themselves. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what the Hollywood apps are this week because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, where do we want to start? Do you want to choose our jumping off point?
I'll say that going into this conversation, I realized after watching Sancho the Bailiff again that I had watched Sancho the Bailiff a long time ago. One of those movies that I had kind of watched and was like, cool. Good, that was good. Historical drama, I enjoyed it, but it was like 10 years ago, so I just, but after watching, I'm like, oh, okay, I remember this, but then watching it again, I was like, oh my God. And then so I ended up watching about 9 or 10 of Mizoguchi's films and about a dozen of Ozu's in the last couple weeks.
That's quite a binge.
yeah, everybody's like, so another Japanese movie again tonight on TV. Okay, great.
I think
But yeah,
I think you have very rapidly overtaken me then.
well, I'll say that I think we might have talked about it a little bit last week, but I didn't really know, like, when I appreciated the films like Tokyo Story and stuff when I watched them a long time ago, but I didn't really go back to them. I was like, okay, Feather in My Cap, I've watched that film, and Feather in My
Yeah.
Cap, I've watched this film. But
Yeah.
now, like, after having watched all of Ozu's post-war films, like, at least basically from Late Spring on, I watched them all because uh, I saw a pattern. I saw a very big, very much a pattern. You can almost argue it's just the same story kind of being retold over and over. Um, and I got a vast appreciation for the films, and I actually like. I can't. I love them. I like. I was like looking forward to watching them, and I found there wasn't enough time in the day to see everything I wanted to see. And I guess the same can be said of Mizoguchi, but for different reasons. They're so like they're vastly different filmmakers, like subject matter and style. Like one doesn't like by the end, Ozu didn't even move his camera. Like it didn't move. Like it just sat there. And Mizoguchi is the complete opposite. Like you watch his early stuff, like not early, but his when he considers his first film, like his like 30th, which was Osaka Elegy. Just you can see like this crazy dolly movements and long takes and like the camera, like I was shocked it's 1936 and the camera's like going up through here and down over there, and like it was remarkable. And yeah, so I took a long way to say I love these two guys,
Yeah.
and I appreciate them immensely. And I gotta watch more Japanese movies now. Now I'm just these guys seem to be the Godfather. I mean, I was always a Kurosawa fan, but I feel like I limited myself so much now that I've watched these guys. They just have such a commentary on the human condition, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you go ahead.
outside of America, really, Japan was one of the real powerhouses. Like for me, the big three is always America, France, and Japan. And obviously, France and Japan didn't quite live up to the how prolific Hollywood was ever.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't.
No, but in terms of the amount of great films they managed to produce, both countries are up there. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
very, very consistent for a very long time, and yeah, I guess Kurosawa for pretty much for every Westerner, it feels like Kurosawa is your way into Japanese film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely was mine when we watched Rashomon, my third week of
Well,
film studies.
I guess you could argue that was like the entire West because he won. Was it the Venice Film Festival? He in
Mm,
'51 he won that, and basically Japanese film. It was into the Western folks started to see it and kind of
yeah,
appreciate it more and have more respect. And thank God we did because these great filmmakers are discovered and appreciated now, and you can just see like it's crazy when you watch Mizoguchi's. Like I watched the story. I think my favorite one of his actually the story of the last chrysanthemum.
oh yeah,
Just
that's a good one. Yeah,
insane camera movements for 1939.
yeah,
Like he's just so ambitious, and like he's like shooting stuff through the wall, like through the wall. Obviously we can see the people, but there's dirty frames and stuff, and just crazy ambitious cinematography to go along with subject matter that really speaks to me. I guess my politics, whatever you want to call it, but extremely sympathetic to the lower class, I guess you would say, the working class, and to women. My God, every one of his movies, in some way, is sympathetic to how Japanese society treated, or I guess treated women. And like I said, Ozu did the same, in a lot of ways, like talking about family dynamics, marriage. A lot of those, like the one we're going to talk about, Late Spring, is about this daughter and her father that are had this heavy bond because he's a widower rather, and her reluctance to get married because of her attachment to him, and that's like, and that theme comes up over and over when you watch the films, and it's funny like watching them. Like I watched, like I said, all those post 45 films, and like he uses the same set a lot. Like that, there's this one hallway he uses for every businessman's office. And like he'll repurpose other hallways. You just recognize the set. You're like, oh, I know that's the same set. And obviously, both of them used like the same actors all the time. Ozu especially. Well, Mizoguchi too, I guess. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Ozu had like the same cinematographer. He had two cinematographers his entire career that he worked with. He had his co-screenwriter who used to made almost all of his movies with. Yeah, he was. I mean,
Mr.
part of
Yoda.
that era where it was very common, I guess, for people to just find the person they wanted to work with and stick with them.
But like, not just the person. Like Ozu had like always the same ladies. You know, like I think my favorite Ozu one was Floating Weeds. Either that or Good Morning. Like
Yeah.
I love both. They're both great. But like you almost like expect like, oh, when is she gonna pop up? When is this one gonna pop up? When's that one gonna pop up? And he used the same guys too. I'm terrible. Just as a preface, this is going to be the podcast, the Twitch stream where I say every single name wrong. So just be ready for that. All the names will be wrong, both character and actor, because I cannot speak properly. But yeah, just amazing. Like how the uniformity of Ozu's work in that period. And I think I read somewhere he said it was like a painter who paints the same flower, but just with different colors. I guess some bad paraphrase there, but you can see it. Like he's basically kind of feels like to me he's just constantly talking about the same thing, which is, you know, life goes on. I guess is what I got from it. You know, like no matter what it is, life goes on, and like the ellipses, like it's amazing. Like I love it. Like you know, like you never all these things go center around weddings. I don't think you see one wedding I can remember. I think in Equinox Flower, you see just the reception, not even the wedding. And every other big moment is the wedding. And even in this film, we don't even see Setsuko Hera after she as soon as after she leaves the house to go get married. We don't see her again. Don't see the wedding. Never see her husband.
Yeah,
which
Gary
is
Cooper.
From this way down. This way down. Which I love. And I love this is my favorite performance of hers by far out of all the films. I think it's my favorite one because of her passion in it. She's like very animated. In some of the other films, which is intentional, clearly, the performances are kind of muted, I guess. I think I also read somewhere he doesn't want to see emotion, he wants to see movement. That's what he stressed to his actors, you know, express what you want to express through how you move, not your face or anything like that.
Well, yeah, Setsuko Hara, I think she has this element about her that is, it's almost like the acting version of whatever thing he was trying to go for at all times in his films, where with the least amount of effort she's able to communicate a feeling. Because like Setsuko Hara's kind of image is her smile. Like this, she has a smile that's basically glued onto her face, that's like her resting face almost for most of the movies she's ever been in. So when partway through the movie the smile goes away, it's like a devastating moment, and you feel her emotions for the rest of the movie just from the absence of the smile.
Very much.
It's really incredible. It makes a lot of sense why he was so fond of her.
Yeah, it's like devastating actually, because I'd watched Late Spring was one of the couple that I watched his years ago, and I was like, okay, interesting, I get it. And then I watched all these films, and I went back to Late Spring before this. We talked about this, and it really hit me like that moment when her face, like in the theater, when she looks over and sees the woman that she thinks her father is going to marry, and just like the devastation, like it just gets to you. It's heavy. And it's wonderful. Like I really I loved this film. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't my favorite Ozu, but it doesn't mean that it isn't great. And I don't see why it's great. It really does set the tone for the rest of his work until the end of his career. And even like there's lines that he repeats over and over. Like in this film, the father says it's useless to have daughters. Mr. Ryu there, my man. And he's in his final film, An Autumn Afternoon. He says the exact same thing after he marries off his daughter. The exact same thing. But in that film, he's even more emotional. He's in a bar. He's drinking, talking to this waitress this bartender who looks like his dead wife, and you can just feel the loneliness. And in this film, the last 5 minutes are devastating. He walks home alone, goes in, he realizes he's alone, right? And at some point, we all die alone. That's what they say, I believe, in Autumn Afternoon. We all die alone, and that's kind of, to me, you know, one of the themes that you keep seeing over and over that really, I don't know. if it's like a lamenting that this kind of loss of the whatever Japan used to be or something, and this new individualism. But I don't know. I didn't see it before. But after watching these films, I feel there's like a deep sadness underneath everything. You know, underneath all the smiles and the happiness and no, mind you, there are like Tokyo Story is rife with that, and it's not like they're always happy, but there is an emotion I think that is kind of conveyed in a way that isn't usually conveyed in films. It's something you sense rather than necessarily see outright.
No. I mean, well, the thing that really strikes me when I watch an Ozu movie is how really lucky Japan as a nation was to have a director like that, who was really willing to just show domestic existence as it was at that time. Like, it's strange, you watch his movies now and they feel so classic that they feel like they would have almost been old movies when they were released, in a way. They have this kind of feeling as if they have always existed. And yet there was a time when they were contemporary. Like, I find it so funny when they're in the Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice, and the girl's like going out and she's playing pachinko. It's like, what is this pachinko thing, you know? Or like they go out and it's like it's her first time eating ramen and stuff. And you're like, this is we now think of pachinko and ramen as being these like timeless staples of Japanese culture, and yet they, at the time, like 1952, when that movie was made, they were pretty brand new, really, fresh off the presses.
Yeah.
So like he was really dealing with contemporary life.
He was, yeah.
Which really was, I think, after the war in Japan, that was the most kind of common type of film that was made. And it's funny because I guess we think so much of the samurai movie and all that type of thing, but it was really after, particularly the years immediately after the war, it was the contemporary dramas were the most common overall, largely for censorship reasons, because the Americans were worried that film, like they had a rule against showing the feudal system. So that's basically, it was like, oh, so no movies from the past then.
Well, I know the Americans, just from reading history years ago, the Americans had a heavy hand in the Japanese Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And taking away the necessary, like bringing about the thought of the individual, I guess, more so. Like divorce,
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere was kind of became more widespread after the Constitution, which was largely because of American influence. And you can feel a deep cynicism in Ozu's films about this America kind of coming in there. Like you see Coca-Cola everywhere. I don't think that's product placement. I think that's a
No.
that's a sad thing, right? And
Well, yeah, I mean, this movie is crazy for how much Japanese tradition is present in it. Like, he has the no theater scene, he has the tea ceremony at the start, all this stuff. Even shows the Imperial Palace right off the top of the movie, or not this one actually. That's Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has all his movies have all this stuff that are like technically not. I think it's a thing probably about both these directors, like a sort of conservatism of belief, most likely. Which for me kind of puts them in a similar league with someone like John Ford, who is kind of representative of this. Like, I think the thing that particularly Ozu, but Mizoguchi as well, would have in common with someone like John Ford would be that they made these movies that were what the next generation kind of rallied against. Which is it's nice looking back at that time and seeing, you know, these films that kind of started this legend, or well, I guess this is what the point I was trying to make there was, you know, how lucky Japan is to have had these films to kind of tell themselves what culture they live in. Like, without the films that do that, and like John Ford would have done for the American West, or the entire concept of what America is, without those myths, there is nothing to rebel against. Like, if Ozu and Mizoguchi don't exist, then the great directors who came after them, like Imamura and Oshima, they would not have something to be opposed to, or something that to be like, oh, that's old, now we're going to do the new thing. So in a way, it's what I always myself kind of prefer the more classic ones. I prefer the building of the legend and the establishment of something very concrete.
See, I see from watching the films, mind you, I might have broke my brain a little bit, but I saw like vast differences between Ozu and Mizoguchi, especially in their view of Japan, I guess.
Yeah.
With Ozu, like especially every film mentions the war in some way. And towards the end, he started in the last film. He's outright in saying like two characters talking about, oh, what happened if we had won? The two of us would be drinking in New York right now. And one guy says, oh, maybe that wouldn't have been the best thing. And the guy's like, oh yeah, the militarists were terrible, right? But you can feel in that like a melancholy, like I wish we won. Whereas with Mizoguchi, I feel like he's very happy they didn't win. I feel like he doesn't really like the society he was in.
Yeah.
Um, I like especially like after reading a little bit about the man and where he came from, like his father, like okay, let's maybe talk about Ugetsu a little bit. His father apparently during the Russo-Japanese War had tried to profit, like sort of business to make money during the war, and lost everything, and was forced to sell his older sister into prostitution. And that clearly had a massive effect on Mizoguchi because he made so many films about those people. People who got, basically, and you look at his characters, look at like a movie like Life of Haru, or even this one. Let's stay on track, stay with Ugetsu. The father, Genjiro. God damn, I'm gonna ruin that. He, he basically forsakes his family to try to make money. And what happens? He loses his wife and he almost loses his son. And he goes insane and he lets himself be tempted because this woman says, oh, I loved your wares and all these things. And he gets taken in by the demon. And he even calls his pottery his children at one point, which, tells me that he thinks it's more important. And then the side plot about his neighbor and friend going out for glory. And what happens? He completely, who faces the consequences of that? Neither one of them. It's their people that love them, their wives, the people who support them. They face the most of the consequence, like basically the brunt of it all, right? For this ambition that really amounts to nothing, a little bit of money, right? And I just feel a deep cynicism about that within Mizoguchi's work. He really, like, seems to me like he hated fathers, hated men, a lot of them, with the exception being the last chrysanthemum when the father says, "Oh, go see your wife, like you're forgiven," kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But besides that, almost never do we see an authority figure or a male kind of realize the error of their ways and be like, you know what, you're right. No, they stick to tradition and they're rigid and they always end horribly. Mizoguchi films. There's no happy line. There's no happy ending in any of them.
Yeah.
But they always get me. They always get me. Like I think I cried at least half of them. I cried like a little baby during Chrysanthemum. It's amazingly effective filmmaker. And like I said, I think they both had like light criticisms of Japan. Not just, I don't think Ozu was a nationalist or anything. I don't think he was. I think he did have his problems with that, but I think he in the end loved Japan. Whereas I didn't feel it as much out of Mizoguchi. I didn't feel that love. I felt more of a rage against what he kind of came up in. And maybe their circumstances were different. I don't know exactly what Ozu his life was like growing up. But I felt that coming watching the Mizoguchi films, and also amazing pace, but also sorry, I have so much to say about both these guys. But like Ozu, he also has great pace. I remember reading, oh, he's slow or something on message boards years ago, and it's funny. Like at the start of the films, it's like this kind of weird. It is maybe it's there's a definite a slower pace, but by the end of it, you can't take your eyes off the screen. Like it's the last 45 minutes are always just like, whoa, what, I hope there's only 5 minutes left. Like how what? That's it? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's just so much. You're so invested. I find like it's just really amazing filmmaking. Like just remarkable in both counts. I love these two guys now. They're masters among the great. Like I just mean, sorry, not to. They're clearly masters. What I mean is now, like I will revisit these films over and over. I can't wait to watch these again and show these to people who maybe have never seen them and that I know. They just have so much to say. There you go. They have so much to say about being alive, no matter where you're from.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's fascinating about Late Spring and Ozu's work overall is how he's so very Japanese, and yet you're able to understand the emotions and the situations so well of the characters. Like it's an incredible achievement. His like when you talk about the Coca-Cola sign and stuff, it's like he has this essentially Japanese quality of and like he would have been a big Hollywood fan as well. Like he really loved Hollywood movies. So he would have been like again one of those people, one of the quintessentially Japanese thing of take something foreign and just make it ours. You know, that's the way that they do it. um, he definitely had that quality, and yeah, it's very impressive, and I do I found it funny that both of these movies have like the opening of Ugetsu has the no style music in the beginning. I'm not gonna do the call thing, but it was funny just to watch that be present in both films here. The very uh, distinct sound of the no theater, and I love that Chishu just seemed to be wrapped in the no play. He just was like enjoying it thoroughly. Just had a look of pure bliss on his face while he was watching it. Like that was the interesting thing was they never talked about really what the family situation was. Like I know a lot of this movie, particularly because it was only 4 years after the war, there was a lot of back and forth with the censors about what was okay to do. Like when they go out just before her wedding, and I think it is, and they head off on a trip together. Chishiryu has a line about the air is so fresh here, not like Tokyo where it's very dusty. And the original line that Ozu wanted to put in there was, about the ruins, but it was against the rules of the censors to talk about the American fueled destruction of.
You mean the massive carpet bombing of Tokyo, where they destroyed the whole place?
Yeah, that.
I wonder why. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting because there's a quote in this book. I have this book here. 100 years of Japanese films. It's kind of a cringy cover with a film critic nerd doing a samurai thing, but
Jesus
it's a pretty
Christ.
decent book.
Is that what that was?
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a great book, but some editor should have been like, "Wait a second, guys."
Well, you know what's great? I can take the cover off, and it's just a black cover. So
that is a good cover. Okay.
But there's a quote here about the censors. It says, despite such vagaries, most Japanese filmmakers thought that things were much better under the occupation forces than they had been under their own military, and many would have agreed with Kurosawa when he said of the US Army censors, not a single one among them treated us as criminals the way the Japanese censors had. Having lived through an age that had no respect for creation, I recognized for the first time that freedom of creation could exist. And the interesting thing, I guess, about the likes of Ozu, Mizoguchi, Kurosawa was that they were very much outliers in terms of the fact that, like now, when most films are made by producers, like producers are the ones who get movies going. Those guys got to basically almost had carte blanche in terms of the films they wanted to make in the post-war era. So, that's why that quote you said about Mizoguchi talking about that film that he considers his first one. That's pretty much why, because at that point they would have transcended. They would have been able to be like, this is the movie I want to make. I just find it very fascinating, like the non-creative decisions that go into why a film is a certain way that it is, or like where the money's coming from, what the censorship of the time will allow. And I think Late Spring has a lot of those, like you said, it's almost like pot shots he's taken at the censors. It's like, I'm going to throw the Coca-Cola thing in there. I saw another thing that said there was a sign about when they cross the bridge on the bicycles, there's a sign that says 40 tons or more not allowed, or whatever that type of sign is. And the book, or whatever it was, said that this is a reference to the American Army trucks. Because it's obviously not relevant to the two kids on the bike,
Of course. No, but he made sure to put that. That's little subtle digs, right? Subtle digs.
Because it's crazy,
he's
like the families almost invariably in these movies are missing people. You know, there's people who are not in the families, and like we never know what happened to the mother in this story. And supposedly that trip that they were taking at the end of the movie was to visit the mother's grave, but that didn't make it past the censors.
Hmm. Like it's amazing. Like they do make every film makes subtle references to the war or to terror. Like in this movie, they talk about oh, she's still having trouble recovering from her forced labor camp time, and
Yeah.
it's just mentioned like so matter of factly. But it's like any other film. Like if that was a Hollywood film, the music would go down. It would, like things would happen that you would be like, okay. But in this film, it just said like, I'm going to get a,
It's
I'm
very
going to
interesting to think about this in relation to a Hollywood movie. Like for me, when it comes to like writing movies, thinking about making movies, what I love about Japanese films is that they are like such a great contrast point to American movies, where you're like between even between these guys like Kurosawa, Mizoguchi, Ozu, you can throw like Mikio Naruse in there as well. They don't make movies like each other at all. Like and even in terms of structure, like if you were to make Late Spring as a 3-act film, like what is the inciting incident here? The inciting incident is when she gets married at the end of the movie that you don't even see.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else that happens in over the course of the film that you could identify as a inciting incident, and it really puts into context just how limited our modern idea of what a film can be actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I definitely feel particularly Western countries just have this absolute loss of contemporary domestic stories. And I think actually Mike Lee was a fella who did a very similar thing to Ozu in a lot of ways. Like he really made films about people who were in these kind of situations, like real families, a mix between like the working class and the middle class. Mike Lee's movies have a lot of that type of thing, and of course he also reused a lot of the same actors and that type of thing. So yeah, it's a thing that I wish there was more of. Like I wish countries would stop worrying about gangsters and guns and go more towards the domestic thing. Because like the thing that Mizoguchi and Ozu have in common is that their films were generally geared towards women. Like they were being marketed for women.
Yeah,
Show.
yeah.
Whereas Kurosawa was quite obviously like Kurosawa made maybe one film about a woman, and it was very very early in his career.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually Setsuko Hara was in it. I think wasn't she like the lead?
Yeah,
Isn't
I
that?
think it wasn't it the. I haven't actually seen it. I think it was the. What was it called? See it here.
Oh, I read about
No
like a
Regrets
week.
for Our Youth. I think it was.
That's what it is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read about that. I haven't seen it either, but that was I remember reading that it was the only film that was female kind of driven that he ever made.
Yeah.
And of course it was her.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, no. I think a lot of films, especially now, and like because everything's so geared towards making money, that basically people are scared to just do that. They're scared to not fall back on genre to make to be excited. They're scared to not be exciting necessarily. They're scared to not have these highly dramatic
Well, yeah,
moments.
that's it. They're scared to be not exciting,
Yeah,
and they're geared towards the largest possible audience.
yeah, that
It's
too.
the Phantom Menace effect, where it's like, let's get a bit in here for the kids, let's get a bit in here for the ladies, let's get a
The
bit in here for the
blockbuster
old
effect.
folks.
You want to
Yeah,
get butts in the seats, right?
yeah.
But these are obviously more compelling films, and you can't argue with me otherwise. I think anybody that would sit down and watch it and actually watch it, one of these movies, would appreciate it because
Mm.
you would, or even if you watch three, like you start seeing something, you start feeling that melancholy that with regards to Ozu, that just kind of is slowly and subtly kind of there, right? That kind of builds itself as the film goes. A loss of a family member, and like it's always kind of about loss. Like Ozu and Mizoguchi, they both kind of talk about that. What was lost in these interactions, and I mean, it's and I think you're right about Mike Lee and other people kind of like him. That I think I'm more as I get older, I'm just basically kind of done with genre films unless it's going to be Tarantino doing it because he's the one that can still do it pretty good. You know what I mean? Like I'm just more drawn to the domestic, to the working class, the middle class.
Well, I guess the big thing for me is I definitely found watching in the last year watching Tokyo Twilight and rewatching Tokyo Story, I managed to appreciate these movies for the first time. Like I feel like it's definitely not a I didn't react to them in a very significant way 10 years ago when I was early 20s. So there's definitely an element for me of understanding life a bit better, understanding the importance of certain types of relationships. Whereas it's Kurosawa from the beginning is such a fascinating, compelling filmmaker, and he makes obviously very bombastic. Like his acting performances are very over the top and full of like there's always so much energy in all of his shots. Constant, it seems like constant movement. He basically is godlike in that he seems to control the weather very significantly.
Yeah.
It's like if there's wind, the wind is doing exactly what he wants it to be doing. If there's rain, same thing. Whereas like the elements don't play a huge part in these movies.
They don't, but they're definitely. It's funny, like they'll mention it, like during a wedding scene during like autumn afternoon. It's just like, oh, it was about to rain. Thankfully, it didn't, and then later it does rain, and it's kind of it means something a little bit because he's already mentioned that rain is bad. But it's not like Kurosawa. It's not this character in itself, that kind of just like jumps out of the screen. But Mizoguchi is amazing to me. His camera work is impeccable. The long takes are like that long take when Genjiro wakes up basically, and they take his sword and they say, if the rebel army didn't destroy the jail, we put you in jail. And then the camera kind of slowly comes up, and we just see the sun coming off Lake, like is it Biwa? And it's just like it's only like a minute or a minute and a half take, but you're out of your seat, like you're like, oh my god, like this is pure cinema. It's unbelievably compelling. And the thing with Mizoguchi, like his films to me, like are fast. Like no matter the length, it's just I'm not like it never drags ever. Like with Ozu, it builds, and you can feel it build, especially at the end. But with Mizoguchi, I'm just on the ride, and then it's like, oh my god, it's over. Like that's just like Sancho the Bailiff is so epic, and even this film, Ugetsu, they're all like, it's amazing the work that they did at this stage of their careers. Like when we think of filmmakers now, so many filmmakers kind of peter off by the time they're in their 50s and 60s. Many, with some notable exceptions, of course. But these guys made their best work at this time, basically at the end of their careers. Mizoguchi made Ugetsu and died 4 years later. And I mean, Ozu's run there of about 12 films in 12 years, he died like right after making An Autumn Afternoon. It's amazing. Like, and it really does. I think we talked about it before. I think it kind of proves that, for me anyway, filmmaking is something. It's hard to do when you're young, and it's extremely hard to be great because it's about insight and having something to say in that way.
I think as well though it's worth acknowledging that a lot of what happens with directors has to do with the environment they live in. So like the reason Kurosawa's career sort of petered off after 1965 was because the industry had changed completely, and the money was just not there anymore. So like he despaired quite a bit in the 70s in his career because he felt like the movies he was making were not making money and that he'd become a failure. Whereas the reality was like tastes had changed, technology had changed, like television was obviously taken over in a big way. And like things have only accelerated since then. He lost his ear. Okay, it's
I
back.
lost my ear. I'm back.
Well, like, yeah, like in the years after that, it only got more intense. It's like anime was born in its Super Saiyan form.
Yeah.
Video games came into play. So for someone like Kurosawa lasted until he was still making movies like in the mid '90s.
Yeah, he
I think he
did. Yeah,
made. I think Madadayo may have came out around the mid '90s. Dreams was definitely the early '90s anyway.
yeah.
So the fact like these guys were working at the peak of the industry when the industry in Japan was the highest it would ever be.
Hmm.
Um, and I think like the part of the reason, obviously, there was less competition in terms of entertainment at the time, but also it's kind of a give and take. It's like that once the industry starts to peter off a little bit, it's like, well, now we have to, make bigger risks. I mean, the Hollywood thing has been to take bigger risks, or not to take bigger risks even, but to put more money into more sure things rather
Yeah.
than putting the money into less reliable products, which
Take less
completely kills
risks.
the creativity.
Yeah. It does. 100% does. And those films also are just how is it possible to make like it's hard to make something great with like 1,000 different people and all these departments and all these like how can you possibly like take control of all the work like we talked about it during CGI the amount of people and work and time spent like how can one director possibly focus on all that and that's where it becomes these committee things studios basically give the go ahead for this and that and it just becomes this giant machine
Yeah,
rather than a piece of work an
yeah.
artwork um
And of course, the point
but
is like those types of movies always existed. Like they always have and they always will. But the difference is having less of the other side of thing. These types of movies that people will still be watching in 60, 70, 100 years time.
yes. And not only watching, but learning how to do it from them, like teaching. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine we'll be teaching Ant-Man and the Wasp in film class. I hope not. I don't know though. Who knows?
Godzilla
But
versus Kong.
hey now. Oh
Mortal
yeah, no.
Kombat.
Mortal Kombat. Hey, no Christopher Lambert, no me. Um, but yeah, I I miss these two guys, even though I was born 30 years after they both died. So I don't know how I can miss them, but I wish there was more like them. Uh, Mizoguchi, um, I keep going back to him, but his stuff really, it's something that you don't see. I don't think from Hollywood films of that same era. Just the deep criticism, I guess, of I think Kurosawa. I'm sorry, I think Ozu had a deep criticism for this capitalist kind of system that he saw rising up as well. Because it's in the conversations. It's in the conversations between the people who work, like these middle managers, or even some of the films at the end where these guys are clearly bosses, and like a couple of the characters have cars,
Yeah.
which a lot of Ozu's films are train related. In this period, and you like even this late spring has one of the signature Ozu on a train, the camera on the train shot, traveling,
Yeah.
and that signifies like, and one of the characters in one of the films mentions that like, oh, we don't have cars, we're not bosses. But even in the later films, one of the characters has a car denoting his status. We still hear talk of like, oh, this is just kind of empty. I work all this time and I don't have any protection. Like I'm not, like I can get fired and like I'm just a salary man. That's what they call them. They use that phrase, salary man,
Yeah.
and it's like a derisive thing. It's not something it's something that's new. It's not something that people want. It's some do, and they think they do, and then it's like, no, you don't want to be like this. I'd rather have my own business. Oh, you don't have your own business. It's tough. And just all these people, it seems like that are left out in the cold by the world around them. And you feel that in both filmmakers' work at this period, and it's just it's so effectively portrayed in the films. It's not something that's like totally slapping you in the face, but it's just there, and you can't help but feel it and sense it and hear it and get it from every one of these movies in some
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah, I mean that's the big difference. Like the funny thing is that America imposed this censorship on Japanese cinema at the time, and yet they were not essentially espousing American values.
Mm.
Like the fact that say prostitution was so common in Japanese films at this time compared to America, where like you know you'd get the closest you'd get is like a sly nod and a wink to that type of carry on. Uh, it's just an interesting comparison. But the major thing was like these films really didn't pretend like American movies continue to do that everything's gonna be okay if you just
No,
follow the rules.
no, that's what, like,
Like it's really, I guess
and
it's really about it's really about your own acceptance of life, of the crap that life throws at you.
mm,
Uh, but yeah, I get like late spring. Late spring is fascinating in terms of it being uh, like obviously there's a lot of adoration and love for tradition, but at the same time, this whole arranged marriage thing doesn't bring anybody much happiness. Like there's clearly a lot of truth in his speech to his daughter about it's an adventure that you need to go on. That the part of your life that you had was over, and in 3 years' time, maybe you'll love your husband and all this type of thing. It's like, yeah, it's like it could be true, like, but also there's so much melancholy in it that it's like, yeah, this like old traditional system that they are being forced apart by is not being portrayed as being a net good. And I think he probably could have
mm.
gotten away with showing it as being neutral with the censors. I don't know. Like I don't believe the censors forced him to put in this very sad ending. I feel like it was very much
No.
because the loneliness thing is really his thing.
Oh my God. And like I was kind of getting at before, but of course didn't get to. All these films, starting with this one, they all have those quintessential, those the Ozu look, the how the spaces look, the apartments, the houses, and I feel like since it's all one thing, it's just like life is continuously repeating itself, and no
Mm.
matter what, we all get to experience these losses. We all experience, eventually we all lose the ones we love in some way or another. And I think that's really effectively portrayed when it's a father daughter, because they keep repeating that. Oh, once she, because I guess that was the thing. Once your daughter marries out, she's part of that family now, and she's no longer part of yours, right? The sons would
Yeah.
be, but not your daughter. So it's just by doing that, by portraying these relationships, father and daughter, it's really true loss without anybody dying, right? It's like I'm never gonna like a big thing in Ozu's films is the last trip. Oh, this is our last trip together as a father and daughter, our last trip together as mother and daughter, our last trip together as a family. And it's very important, clearly, more important than the wedding, which would be, in every other fucking movie, it would be the thing to you start the movie at the wedding for Christ's sakes, or end
Yeah.
it there or whatever. But that's not important. What's important is how it is the final time we're together before we all go apart.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, we see it here. They go on their little trip together at the end. And that's kind of the last bit of happiness in the film. After that, it's just deep, deep, deep sadness. Um, and
Which
I
is
love it.
which is nice because it's like they're not dead. It's not the last
No.
time they're ever going to see each other. It really just it puts you in the position of what do I want to believe comes next.
Hmm.
Um, because we don't the fact that we don't meet her husband means we have nothing to base uh, our idea of what her future will be like on. Like we don't know. We know he's like probably relatively attractive. We know she doesn't seem to have very strong opinions of him one way or the other, and we are just not given that opportunity to forge an opinion on him either. Um, and I guess that's what's interesting is how he's one of those directors who very acutely directs your emotional response.
Hmm.
Like he doesn't he intentionally does things that are abnormal for film directors to do in terms of where your attention goes. Um, and it just makes it a very unique experience. Like you can never watch his films and not know they're his. Um, I don't know if you ever saw this video essay by Nerdwriter about um, the the vase cutaway in
Oh, that's such a strange cutaway to me. The vase cutaway, because she's looking at it. Is that like? See, this is where I don't know the context of the vase in society in Japan. Like, I don't know if it has some, because from what I remember, she looks happy, and her father's, and then she looks at the vase again. We come back, and she's just totally sad.
Yeah.
Does the vase represent like? This is where I assume it's like basically the audience can kind of figure out what they want from it, kind of thing, or is there something that signifies in the culture that I don't know about?
Yeah.
Something. I'm asking a question. I don't know.
Well, it's why don't we take a look at it?
Let's
Oh, why
see.
is there a ringing?
Rangin.
An awful ringing. I don't know if it's my ear or my headphones or what. Let's pop this on here. You should be able to hear this without having to switch anything.
Lovely day, she lets herself feel the sadness of the coming loss.
ねえお父さん、私お父さんのこととても嫌だったんだけど。
The cut to the vase is so striking here because it arrives at exactly the moment of emotional transition. As Donald Ritchie notes, what we would expect for a filmmaker to do is hold on Noriko's face as the smile fades into a frown so that we can take that emotional journey with her. Instead, Ozu interrupts that journey and substitutes this object. It's such an unusual decision that every Ozu film scholar, almost as a rite of passage, has to take a crack at what it means. For Ritchie, being shown the vase at these crucial seconds forces the viewer to imagine Noriko's feelings rather than watch them. Having put ourselves in her position, when Ozu returns to her face near tears, the emotion becomes as real for us as it is for her. Paul Schrader, before becoming a writer and director in his own right, theorized that the vase was a sign of Ozu's transcendental style. We're already thinking of Noriko's loss. In cutting to this image of stasis, Ozu triggers a deeper Zen-like contemplation not just of this specific situation, but of the transience of all things, of ephemerality as the truth of life. For David Bordwell, the vase is an example of Ozu's formal playfulness. By cutting to something that is clearly not in Noriko's line of sight, he's blocking us from the subjectivity of a normal POV shot, decentering our viewing experience so that we can consider the story from various angles and not just from Noriko's perspective. Kristen Thompson believes the vase is...
Well, anyway, I don't want to play the whole video, but...
So no one has a clue. Great.
Yeah, nobody knows.
He does a lot of stuff.
He also references a Japanese critic here who says this is a shot of a vase. There's tons of other stuff in the shot.
That's true. There's a couple things, right?
Yeah. So I don't know.
Ozu's kind of. I mean, he doesn't do this specifically every time, but he is kind of. He likes doing that, cutting away from a scene and not going to our. He never goes like to the character next. We'll go to like 3 different things. We'll go to a field or the building or 3 buildings or this alleyway. Like there's just his editing style is so strange, so basically anti anything you've ever seen. There's no other way to put it. Like that's why maybe people think the pace is strange, but I absolutely love it. And also his reverse shot is so crazy. Like the way conversations are shot, you're right in the fucking middle of it, and eye lines are looking at you almost every time, so you feel like you're being spoken to by the character. Like all these little things, like no one else can really do it. Like that's why every week we kind of talk about directors that really, no one else can make their films, but really no one else would make this film. Do you know what I mean? No one else had the balls to do these kind of things and still expect to have an audience not only just still be there, but have it resonate with them. It's amazingly effective filmmaking, and I'm glad that everybody else was confused as I was by this. Like not confused, but I understand. I don't think it necessarily even is meant to be even understood in a way that logically or whatever. It's just supposed to be, she's alone. The room is silent. Her
Yeah. Well,
father's
for
asleep.
me, I guess it's just. I guess this is what I think of when I think of his very specific tendency to direct your attention. It's like it's like you're not being made to feel exactly her emotions as she feels them. It's like you're witnessing them more than feeling them. But I think there's certain styles of directors. Like some directors are very intellectual. Um, some are very emotional. And I feel like there's obviously a spectrum there as well. Like Ozu is probably very heavy on the emotion side without it ever being melodramatic in any sort of way.
Never. Never.
And yet, the intellect plays a part in terms of. I guess I feel like he's making emotionally intelligent decisions in terms of, why. Well, why. I just wonder what questions he asks himself when he decides these things, because he storyboards things so exactly. Like he's very like Hitchcock in that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where he basically has the thing made on a storyboard before it's ever filmed. So
I know I read somewhere. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
that was all.
No, I know I read somewhere that both him and Mizoguchi were both very uh, domineering, let's say. Not necessarily mean, but every aspect they had very tight control over everything. And another thing about both of them, no real close-ups. Like Ozu would have frames where we get the whole face, but not like a classic close-up like you would like close-up, sure, but not the way you usually think of them. And Mizoguchi, not at all. And that's
Yeah.
Mizoguchi is able to get emotion out of a scene without ever going close. Like
Yeah.
like it's remarkable. Like it's Kubrickian, I guess, or I guess he's Mizoguchi and whatever. That he does all these crazy things. We never go tight. We never go in the face. We never get that look, like chrysanthemums that I keep referencing back to. But when the white Otaku dies, we never even see this moment where I break down during. He just stays in that same long take that he was in the entire time. There's no cut to this, no cut to that. Stays there the whole time. And he does that all the time. And it is like you're just kind of like you said about Ozu, how you're kind of watching rather than being in it, you're watching it. I think that's you can say that even more so for Mr. Mizoguchi. Like you're really just you're almost intruding on these moments,
Well,
Masters.
Mizoguchi famously, whenever it was a particularly emotional scene, he was very far away. I mean, he was almost always very far away anyway, but whenever he does anything approaching a close-up, mostly medium shots, I suppose, they were always very innocuous scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, I think of the scene, for example, in Street of Shame, or the Japanese title was more like Red Light District, but I guess they like the idea of Street of Shame in America more. But
yeah, I'm sure they did.
because it doesn't capture the film really at all. But
not at all.
That
Mickey.
scene where the older lady has her breakdown.
Oh, and her son. Oh, I want to punch her son in the face.
Here.
Oh my god, I hate it.
I think it's this scene here. This is all done in like she's the focus of the scene here.
Yeah.
And yet she's so far away from the camera, and like
look at her, dead center of the frame essentially, far
and
away.
It's all down to what she's saying, like she's singing the song or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god, I can't even watch it.
But that's his kind of standard way. Once big emotions, like once real meaningful interactions or moments are happening in the movies, that he's super far away, which it's like who's telling the story. I mean, for me, I'm so enamored by theatrical staging, like the type of staging you get where everybody's just there together in the scene. It's certainly not the way even all great Japanese directors of this time worked, like Mikio Naruse, quite famously, would literally just have his actors read all of their lines in sequence and then turn around and shoot the camera on the other actor and just have them do all their lines in sequence. So the emotional, and I wonder like those shots that Ozu got where the actors looking at the cameras, they couldn't have been considerably different than that either. The way they shot that. So the fact that Mizoguchi does this other thing then of having everybody so often be in there, it's very much like where kind of Bong Joon-ho is in terms of his staging as well. Like the ensemble staging is so important to them all, which is something I really, really appreciate because I do like when the actors are genuinely interacting with them. It's just so much more physical. Like I guess with Ozu, it's the composition is so pristine that he's able to communicate very large emotion by very minimal movement. So like obviously at the end of Late Spring when the father peels the apple and drops his head, it has it has such a significant emotional impact.
Am I wrong that there's a little tear in his eye? Is that what I saw? Some glistening, right? Like it's like it gets you, man. You can't, like, it's not like you think about it after, like it stays with you, and that's why I don't know. Maybe I watched all these films, but no, I'm happy I watched them like I did because I was able to really get a good sense of what, especially with Ozu, the continuity of content continuity of the themes and stuff of what he was trying to say basically. With Mizoguchi, I think his themes are kind of like every story is its own kind of thing, right? But he kept going back to things. Whereas with Ozu, it's very overt, like sets, actors, everything are almost interchangeable in a lot of ways. Stories, he remade stories and that kind of thing. Like Good Morning and Floating Weeds, which Floating Weeds is still my favorite. That movie, perfect. Mickey from Street of Shame and from Ugetsu, the demon lady Wakasawa or whatever, she's in that as well. All these actors too are remarkable. Like that they're they can play in an Ozu movie where, although Mickey in the Ozu film is definitely one of the more emotional characters that he kind of portrays, but they have just great range. They can go to Mizoguchi and do this, and then go over to Ozu and do that. And it's the craft is amazing. And I guess that's the director's work also. That's what they get out there. And there's this great actor from Floating Weeds and from End of Summer. I guess he was a famous theater actor in Japan. He's great in those two Ozu films that I saw him in, though. Oh, I can't recall his name. He plays the father and he plays the old master actor in Floating Weeds. I think. Did you see Floating Weeds?
No.
It's on Criterion. It's about an actor, an aging actor who goes back to an old town, his old stomping grounds. I think he's a kabuki actor, but it's perfect. I think it's a perfect movie, honestly. Has all that stuff, just a bit more emotion than usual in an Ozu film. Scandalous content, which is not usual. Check it out, anyone that hasn't seen it yet. As far as these two films, where do they rank in the filmography of each as far as the ones you've seen? With say Ozu, what do you consider Late Spring? Is this the one you kind of would go back to as a go-to?
Oh, I'd certainly go back to it, but I think he really, like, I was really impressed. I guess the reason this whole thing kicked off was because I just randomly watched Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice, and that had a big impact on me. I felt like there was something very different, and I feel like Tokyo Story is kind of the same. Like they both have very different types of things. Like Ozu's go-to thing was the parental relationships, the marriage, like marriage being a big theme. Like obviously marriage was again a theme in Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice, but the girl in that is kind of playing a similar role to Setsuko Hara here, and yet she's extremely happy-go-lucky. Like she never has the downbeat moment. She's just like, yeah, I'm going out playing pachinko, having the time of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like they did I felt like he was really hitting his stride there, because like the pre-Warriors, his his movies are kind of like lean more towards comedies. And then I know his general co-writer after the war found the first movie that he did after the war to be very depressing, like too depressing.
The Tenement one, or no, the Hen. It stars
A Hen in the Wind.
The Hen in the Wind. Yeah, it stars the God damn it, second female director in Japanese history. The one of the two lead actresses in Ugetsu. She's like kind of Mizoguchi's late muse in his work. Forget her name. Terrible. The star of Life of Oharu. She's Oharu.
Kinuyo Tanaka?
Yes. Apparently she was the second director in Japanese history. Second female director.
Oh. 6 films I see here.
Yeah, so all his late work, she was kind of in it. She was the mom in Sancho the Bailiff, and she was in the Hen one. Great actress, though. My God.
Letterboxd has this great feature now where you can click on a film and see where in your country it's available to watch online.
Oh, nice.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of Kinuyo Tanaka's directorial efforts are available.
Her performance in Life of, like you said, that's your favorite Mizoguchi film, Life of Oharu?
Yeah, I think so.
Her performance is remarkable in that film.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, talk about structure. This is a film that's just, it goes like this, basically.
Yeah. And then finally, falls off the cliff. Her son finally acknowledges her. Come home, and then no, look what you've done. It's like, you made me do this, you piece of shit. Fuck, I wish they'd fucking every one of Mizoguchi's films, I've never had this feeling where I want to be like Time Cop and go back in time and rescue a person so much in my life. And go just help, give her some fucking gold and help her out, for crying out loud. It's just, helpless.
It's fascinating how harsh of a world he's willing to portray. Because like Ugetsu is literally like, it's almost like fucking the Song of Ice and Fire levels of what war is like. Like you're literally like, this is the most horrible place on the planet right now.
But that's just any war zone, right? Like, and I think having I think I read it in this Harvard Film Archive thing, so I believe it's true. I mean, Harvard doesn't lie.
No, it's true.
It's true. But clearly that, like, every one of his films is personal in some way, but that film I think is especially personal. Like that, and essentially the Bailiff, I guess, as well. But no, this one, because what his father did, having lost all of his money, basically, doomed his family because of trying to get rich, trying to up his status. So that clearly had an effect on this kid, saying like, you know what, status is fucking bullshit. It doesn't matter. And I'm pretty sure he was like, when he was younger, he had some Marxist leanings and stuff, from just a perfunctory bit of reading on my part. But and it just kind of, it's so apparent in that film, like the father doesn't care about anything but getting rich, but he, him and his friend, they claim it's like, oh, it's for you, but really it's for them, right?
Yeah.
And your heart goes out to the guy, like the deep sympathy he has. Like, even though these films are completely hopeless, every one of them, there's just a deep sympathy that just is kind of everywhere in it, and you can't help but feel an appreciation for the man that he was able to do that, especially in that time. Like, Chrysanthemum was 39, and like you said, there's all these restrictions on filmmaking. I guess because he was critical of the feudal.
I get the impression that Mizoguchi would go to the censor's office and they'd be like, "Now look, you got to make a movie that's critical of. If you're showing the feudal system, it's got to be very critical of it, and you have to show war as being a terrible thing." He's like, say no more. You don't need to tell me this, okay? You're preaching to the choir here. He's like, I'm going to make you so fucking depressed about the concept of the feudal system.
And about basically society in general.
Yeah.
Because, changed around some stuff for sure, but that was kind of everywhere. And, it was a feudal system around the world. You had your lords, you had your strict castes, right?
Yeah.
And, you couldn't, like I wrote down a quote here in my notes that kind of sums up for me his worldview. And one of the characters says in one of the films that it's either chrysanthemums or bailiff. 1 second. It says here, no matter how hard you work, you can't get ahead on your own. In our world, pedigree means everything.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you do, you're stuck. There's nothing you can do to change that in the world we live in right now. And
Yeah.
like, how many characters say, "I wish this world would change" in his films? It says it, the slaves in Sancho the Bailiff. Like everybody said, like, this is just, you just feel like, oh my god, it's so fucking hopeless, and there's no way anything's ever going to get better. And it's kind of like you said, it's no one, like, you would never see that anywhere else really, in any other contemporary films at that time. At least in the ones that I've watched in America, and the things that I'm used to, I should say, the things that I was kind of inundated with notable exceptions, like the Bergman and some other folks who weren't scared to go there, right?
Yeah.
But just as you can tell, I'm kind of a Mizoguchi guy. He really got me. But I also, like, it's weird. It's like this much more, Like I have a deep appreciation for both of them, and I hope I can watch even more of their films. In the next
Well, I
little
mean,
bit.
you'll hopefully get to watch them in a cinema at some point. That'll be like watching them again for the first time.
Oh shit! I dropped my thing.
One of the only movies I saw. I went to the cinema twice during the pandemic. Once was to see Tenet, and the other time was to see Tokyo Twilight Cinematheque there in Vancouver.
Tenet. Hey, talk about sadness.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen that film.
Tenet?
Yeah, no.
Why would you see it? I saw it so that you didn't have to.
You are the one, you sacrificed for me, like a great Mizoguchi character.
Well, I sacrifice for anybody who will listen to me and just not bother to go see it. It's literally there's literally no reason to watch it.
No, I won't.
You can just rewatch An Autumn Afternoon.
Oh God, what a great film! What a great film! I love Mr. Ryu. I can't say the goddamn names. He just pops up in every Ozu film. He's in every single one. Even if he's just like, hey, comes in for a second, he's always just there. But he's great.
Yeah. Pops up in Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice as the pachinko parlor owner who hates.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, this work is no good.
Yeah, well, that's an
ruin
example
in
of
society.
Yeah, like an example of a character who despises his lot in life, but what else can you do, kind of thing. And this is the world around us.
Now that I think about it, I feel like my experience living in Korea for a year probably heavily informs my current feeling towards the movies, because there is this level of cultural similarity, that you don't get between Europe and East Asia, that you do get between somewhere like Korea and Japan. Whereas like particularly the old men's chatting, like the wistful speaking about the past, and kind of critical speaking about, like, I suppose people do it everywhere, talking about the youth and the new trends that are sending them down the drain, but just the way of doing it in these movies reminds me a lot of fellas I met in Korea.
Yeah, I think that's in my notes here as well. Just the old characters are always talking about, like, one line I think I heard in a couple of Ozu films. She thinks she grew up all by herself. like no appreciation, these young kids, like who, what we did for them, right?
Well, there was a great scene in it where in late spring where, what is it? Noriko's aunt, I suppose. Yeah, is complaining about a woman who just got married and who's stuffing her face with sashimi. And she's like, I would never have done that. And he's like, well, times were very hard for a while and people like to eat. And it's like, you'd do that now if it happened now. And she's like, no, I wouldn't. It's like, yeah, you would.
And then you kind of juxtapose that with the divorcee friend, which is a very new thing, right? And she's just, the way she talks about stuff is so like modern. And she even kisses the father in the bar, and he's just like, Remember,
He has
gives
he has
kid,
his biggest reaction of the entire film.
of any of the films that he's in.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like, oh my god. And it's funny too. I don't know if it's like how friggin' creepy all the old men are to the women, but it's also just like, I don't mean like creepy, like it's just weird, the interactions, like how they all, like how society basically, like it's your job to find this random woman a husband. Like my secretary's sister, I got to get that person a husband.
Yeah.
I got to get this
Well, I
person
think
a husband.
that's actually one of the things as well that I was thinking is heavily influenced by my impression of it now is heavily influenced by my experience in Korea, which is particularly between like the old man that she runs into in town when she goes shopping.
The professor,
is like her teacher, her old teacher, her teacher, I think.
And her father's a professor, right? And I think they're
Yeah.
both professors, colleagues.
But like the intimacy in Korea between students and their teachers was mind-boggling to me, coming from Ireland, where literally the teachers have their office, and if you can't even linger near the door of their office. That's how separated it is. Whereas in Korea, the students are just like walk straight into the teacher's room and like, teacher, I'm getting braces this week. Like they just come in for a chat.
You see it in Autumn Afternoon. They take their middle school teacher, the gourd, back to give him a party. Because somebody saw him on a train. They give him like 20,000 yen. And like a big part of the movie is trying to help him out. And also, you know, they see the relationship between him and his daughter. But just the thought of me and my friends from middle school going and finding our teacher and giving him a party, like that would be
just like you see your teacher outside of school. It's like the worst moment of your life.
I zip my jacket up and walk out of wherever I'm at. I don't care if I have 2 full arms of groceries. I'm walking out. I don't even want to see you. Like I remember I saw a teacher one time in the grocery store and I ran away so we wouldn't have to have a 5-minute conversation. Like it's just not. It's completely different. That's the cultural difference. It's a big one of many, but
yeah, and it's a thing. You've seen House, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. Is like the teacher in that is like the teacher is like meeting up with them on a holiday or something, and it just seems so. It just seems so fucking weird and creepy to a Westerner. But you're like, this is just what they do. Like, there is just this really like there is a real acceptance or a real engagement in this concept that this person is a mentor and this person is being mentored, you know? Like they really take that serious. Oh, Alvy's here. Alvy says her middle school students brought her ice cream and paid for it.
Oh my god.
Brought her for ice cream.
Like in North American schools, like teachers, you'd have to give us a pizza party for us to even accept that you're a person almost. You know what I mean? Like, because most of the time it's almost like a warden and prisoner relationship in a lot of ways. Like if you step in line, like you're going to, you know.
Oh, there's like this belief that your teachers are not even human, basically. And like this is like a generate, like this is, I guess, to tie it back to Ozu, is like he never, even though he shows like the younger people being kind of opposed to the old traditions and stuff, for me it never feels like he's casting hard judgment on them. And in America, in films, that judgment usually goes the other way, where it's like, oh, we're making a movie for the kids, so we got to show how out of touch and corny the old people are. Whereas that doesn't happen. It's not as prevalent in East Asia from my personal experience, and it's weird now because it feels almost more natural to me, that type of relationship now, because my time in Korea was my most recent experience in an education system, and you know, after a year, like the first time I sit down to lunch in a Korean high school, I'm like, it's so weird that the teacher is here and the student is here. It's like you wouldn't like to even see a teacher eating is like accepting or noticing too much their humanity in Ireland.
Oh no, like same here. Like you would not, teachers, like if the teacher's in the lunchroom, they're patrolling to make sure you're being good. Like it's not, there's no sharing lunch, there's no hanging out. Are you kidding me? And there's no first name basis. It's just Mr. Like every one of my teachers, I'm pretty sure I'd still call them Mr. or Mrs. So and so. You know what I mean? It's just so there's no intimacy there, and there's definitely like like I said, we're not taking you out to go get sushi and have drinks and get you drunk. That is for damn sure.
Yeah.
It's just different. But at the same time, so with these differences, that's why it's so amazing that Ozu was able to make it so relatable somehow. The subject matter and everything.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of gets to what I was saying before about why I didn't maybe connect with the movies as much before. Like, I definitely think age is something to do with it, like life experience is something to do with it, but also just being in Asia and understanding those relationships better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really, and it's why I guess I would say I'm quite envious of Japanese people that they come from a country that has this incredible level of self-reflection. It's a thing I've always admired about America, a country that is just willing to relentlessly critique itself, like as jingoistic as their movies can be. America, like I guess, talk about MASH. Like there's a movie, one of the last real kind of military-based movies that is quite explicitly opposed to the military-industrial complex, where they're like, I didn't want to be here in this fucking war. I didn't ask to be here. You forced me here against my will. I'm going to completely tear your whole nonsense hierarchy to bits. That's the thing that's kind of gone away.
Well,
since the Reagan era, I suppose.
That's a very conscious thing. Like now, see, that's the thing too. The reason I think I don't like a lot of blockbuster films now and a lot of these comic book films is they're so deeply intertwined with that system. You know, like pretty much. Like if you look at the movies in the '70s that I like, and even up to the '90s, like the villain a lot of the time would be the CIA or one of these groups. And now, like, look at the Marvel movies; they're all like fucking Iron Man is like the chief CIA agent. You know, like there, and at most it's a rogue CIA person who's bad or a rogue person. It's not the system itself that is necessarily poor. Like in MASH, like that's just straight up. I don't want to be here. Like you said, I was drafted into this. I guess it's also, they've eliminated the draft, so it's harder, I guess, in that way. But yeah, films weren't so buddy buddy with that system as they are now. I think it would almost be impossible to make that film now.
Yeah.
Completely. And it's sad. It's sad. I don't know. I think American films. I think you're right. I think America has the capacity to look at itself and look critically at itself, but it hasn't in a long time. At least in the way I'd like.
Well, here's another one. It's on the go at the moment.
Is this Without Remorse?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where he goes and kills everybody because they did a thing.
Like I just assume that this movie has like CIA or military backing.
It's written by Tom Clancy, so it must.
Yeah. Like these are the good guys ultimately.
I read this book when I was 12 because I loved this Tom Clancy movies, Clear and Present Danger, and something else. The original book, Without Remorse, is about a Navy SEAL he befriends a girl and drug dealers kill her, and he proceeds to kill all of them, pretty brutally. And then he gets forgiven because they're just drug dealers, and they bring him back in the CIA, and he becomes the hero of the next 50 books.
Yeah.
One of the CIA heroes. So that's good. That's good stuff. That's nice. Yep. You couldn't make that movie in 1995. You just couldn't. But now you can. Yeah, Alvi. My first book that I read that I can remember, I think I was 10 or 11. My dad made me read the light fare that was the QB7, the Holocaust courtroom drama. He bet his friend that I would be able to understand what was going on in it, and thankfully I did. That was good. But yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, for me, this thing goes down to like one of the things I really noticed about Americans.
The trolling.
One of the things I really noticed about Americans that I met when I worked in Kansas one summer is they have this incredible, like clearly movie influenced concept of reality, where like they feel like they're in a movie. A lot of these people, like they feel like they're like I remember this really obese guy I was working with. He was like in his 60s or 70s, and he was talking about this gun that he keeps behind the seat in his truck. And he's like, yeah, anytime, if I have it just there in case anybody rushes me. And I was like, man, it would take you 15 fucking minutes, the size of you, to get up, reach around, grab that gun out of the back behind the seat. But he's just part of this cultural identity of people who just see like American Sniper is the way reality is. It's like you got to be this cool dude who's ready to shoot. And I guess to bring it back to Ozu and Mizoguchi is like, I do like films definitely have play a part in your identity as a person from a specific country, like
as a nation.
Yeah, because like in Ireland, even though we got all the same movies as Americans got, well, there is a kind of a real cultural disinclination to identify yourself with someone like Rambo, you know, or someone like that. It's just not like the people who do are very, very relentlessly mocked in the society. So that's why to have films like Late Spring that, you know, are saying this is what we are now. We are now a people who, our families are broken, our traditions are changing, and yet our traditions are still a part of our life. Like we're still going to the No Theater. We're still doing traditional tea ceremonies. But we also have divorced women. You know.
I think it's like, yeah, I think that the movies are a lament for that, but also there's like a net positive aspect to it. Like, you know, that it's okay that you can marry for love rather than being arranged. Because like in Green Tea Over Rice, he says, which is a heartbreaking film in many ways. And the wife, I came around on the wife. I actually, at first I was like, you're so mean. How can you call him a block of wood or whatever they call him?
Calls him a trout? Is it a trout?
Oh, that's what it's like. No, it's not a goldfish, but
or a carp,
flounder, carp, or something. But the husband there, another Ozu staple, says, you know, basically you don't want to end up like us. Like we were arranged, and look how we are. Yeah, and that's a very clear statement.
Just the delivery is so good for that line as well. It's just like it's just like a matter of fact thing, and it's he's not even trying to get a point across.
No, he's just a simple man. He's just saying what is true, right?
Yeah.
And that's my favorite performance by the actor in any of the Ozu films. He's so earnest in that film. He's just like a country boy.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic. Like I mean, Ozu's casting is both of the casting in both of these movies is incredible.
In all their films, they're perfectly cast to me.
Yeah. Well, you look at something like Ugetsu, and at first it's kind of like Masayuki Mori, who plays Genjiro, he's not really like a lead man type of person. He doesn't have that kind of energy. But for a character who's an actual peasant, you know, working, making like the pottery thing is clearly almost a hobby for him.
Yeah, he's a farmer.
Something that he does outside the farm work. Yeah,
the dream.
He has that energy. Like you wouldn't be able. Like Toshiro Mifune is so good as the samurai or the aspiring samurai, you know, this warrior.
Or the coolest dude in the room, every room he's in, honestly.
The coolest cop? Or what is he like, in High and Low? He's just a businessman.
The CEO. But like just that great picture of him having a cigarette, it's like, I want to be friends with you all the time. I want you to hang out with me and just get me into every restaurant, please.
Whereas Masayuki, here, I'll throw up a shot of Masayuki Mori here. This is him. No, I can't really see that good, but yeah, he has this other energy, which works for Ugetsu. He's someone who is like the thing about Tobey in this movie is that he's manic. Like he's almost completely manic about becoming a samurai. To the point where you're like, this is almost not even a credible human. Whereas Masayuki Mori's character is much more, when he gets dragged into that other family situation, it's very much like you feel like he's almost just kind of letting go. He's almost just like, well, I'm just going to accept my situation now, and it feels less. You can kind of understand his wanting to overcome his poverty almost with this feeling of, I've put in so much work with the pottery now that I need to kind of get it over that. Like it's more than, he wants to make that risk between survival and or take the chance between survival and excelling, which is quite credible. Whereas the other guy is just such a lunatic.
Well, but he's of the same ilk,
a type of person who is really not a common person in modern societies, I suppose.
Well, he's desperate almost. They're both desperate to me in the same way. They're both desperate to get out of what they're in. They don't want to be a victim. They don't want to be the villager that you take their shit.
Well, I guess there's a noticeable gap between the dreams of Masayuki Mori's character and Tobei's.
Yes, definitely.
He's like, I just want to be a humble, pottery seller, or the other guy's like, samurai, you gotta be a samurai.
Well, not just humble, he wants to be rich. He wants to be rich, right? And rich means, something, and that's like you can be somebody. They both want to be somebody, essentially, just going a different route. It's the story of, like I said before, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, you're still gonna end up where you started, kind of thing in this society. Because and also, even if you did, it doesn't mean anything. Because what is the point of having those things if you just don't have anybody at the end to share it with, or you hurt the ones around you, right? This movie reminded me so much of The Treasure of Sierra Madre. Just watching it, I don't know what one. I know, well, one was based on Greed from 1927 or whatever, so it's not influence or whatever. But I just felt like they were almost companion pieces to one another. The themes and everything within them.
Yeah, it's just like going all in on well, I suppose in Treasure of Sierra Madre it's even more of a long shot.
Yeah, no, it's even crazier, right? To even try. But it's desperation to get somewhere, to be somebody, whatever that means, to whatever, basically, to get rich quick. I can get rich quick off this pottery in this war situation. This is my only shot. Yeah. So I have to go take this boat, and I have to lose my beautiful, perfect wife with a spear to the belly for a little bit of money. What's that line from Fargo? All that for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
It's.
I think Mizoguchi was someone who probably would have been able to predict a lot of the pandemic response from some people. The people who are just willing. When people, there's been a lot of this talk of I'll never make fun of a movie for a horror movie for having the person run up the stairs again. It's kind of that type of thing. I feel like Mizoguchi really was like, if someone has an opportunity to ruin their lives, they're going to take it most likely.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't see the future, but you think you can. You think you're smarter than whatever everything is telling you. Yeah, you're not. But I don't know. Did you watch The Crucified Lovers, another Mizoguchi film?
No.
It's another great one. I think it's maybe my fave, actually, now that upon reflection. It's another doomed lovers film. It's kind of off topic a little bit, but it's also another story of class, and of the people in charge just being the worst. And there's one character who makes us smile at the camera, and every time he does it, I want to reach through time and grab his face. Grab it like that. So these movies obviously give me visceral reactions. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, that tends to generally be your response.
Yeah, no, I'm always super mad, like I'm in the movie, and I'm a 5-year-old child who's watching fucking Barney. So it's good. But on that,
everyone is not special in their own way, Barney.
My sister used to love Barney. I never liked that son of a bitch. My sister loved him, and my babysitter used to make us watch the bastard. And I hope wherever he's at, he's all right, though. I gave him a lot of guff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel inspired by both of these filmmakers.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing is like, what can we take away? Like the movies or the directors we've talked about recently. Like in my brain, I don't really follow the kind of academic, different, temporal differentiations that they make between certain movements and eras in film. I pretty much I would think of it like there's an era from the beginning of the silent era until kind of the 60s. I would think of as one great big chunk, and then kind of the 60s to now I think of another chunk. So like when we're talking about Cassavetes or Altman, I feel like there's a very direct influence that you can take from that, where you can almost steal their ideas and still make it an incredibly modern film. Whereas to do Ozu, it's not really. If you do an Ozu, like the closest thing I suppose to Ozu, in terms of his very strict commitment to composition, is someone like Wes Anderson. And yet Wes Anderson's style, in contrast to Ozu, is incredibly artificial feeling. Whether you like his movies or not, like it has this very artificial feel to it. It's very staged feel. So yeah, I'm interested in like where can you go with what you witness in these movies? Like for me, the influence is definitely in terms of subject matter above all else. I think just subject matter and structure. Like those are the things that really anything that can break us out of the prism of this fucking 3-act structure bullshit.
The bullshit craft. Like, it's bullshit craft. That's what it is. I forget who said it, but I was watching somebody talk years ago. They had a television show, and they were this person was the star of the show and the showrunner, and he'd hired all these writers to be on the show. And then on the day, him and the actress he was working with, who was kind of a co-producer, had been like, "Oh, you know what? We're going to change this part of the script. We're going to, we want to do it like this is better." And the head writer or whatever, came up and was like, "No, like this has been confirmed. Like we've all gone through this, and we've all, I think the word was vetted or something like that. Like we vetted this. This has been vetted." And it's like, no, like it doesn't matter if you vetted, like, no, because your craft says it's supposed to be one way, or the, prevailing winds say it has to be this way, or the studio, no, this is my fucking show. We're going to do it like this. And I think the show ended up failing, but it's like, basically they're all in this kind of cult of craft, and if you deviate from that, you're not doing it right? You're not doing the thing. That's not a movie, or that's not a TV show, or that's not this. It's just wrong. It's not Save the Fucking Cat or whatever. And that's what I got from this too. That I think going forward, I got, don't even think about any of that. Not that I really did before, but really don't think about it. In fact, think in opposition to it. Try to make something that is kind of not that. Not to say that it isn't exciting or compelling, of course, but who gives a fuck if you hit this thing at page 30 and then make sure you go down here for page 45.
It's the wrong thing to focus on. That's the thing. It's like,
it doesn't matter.
Is all you care about getting this specific like tried and tested emotional response 15 minutes into the movie or 15 pages into the script? You're like, oh, a twist is happening. It's like, okay, well, who cares? It's like your 3-act screenplay is not going to give me the same emotional reaction I got to the wife in Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice criticizing her husband pouring soup on his rice.
And then like saying,
devastated me.
When they all go away and they're just all taking shots at him, even her niece is taking, like, she's like laughing at the jokes. It's like, you assholes, like, leave alone. Works hard. But
it's like the cutaway, like the vase cutaway. This is not something that is teachable in that way. And like the problem is like, well, I guess we all get kind of caught in these prisons of ideology, and I guess the prevailing ideology, I think, is flying out of your ear today.
Sorry, I dropped my earphone. What did you say?
The prevailing ideology in North American filmmaking is certainly focused or geared towards two things, I suppose. One is the supremacy of Hollywood, that working within that industry is the be all and end all of filmmaking, which, I don't know. Maybe the collapse of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association will will lead us somewhere. Which actually, I think the Hollywood Foreign Press Association was partly responsible for the funding of uh, the what do you call it? Remastering of Ugetsu.
Really?
I think that was one part of the opening title. Yeah.
Oh, I think I didn't remember
So,
that.
where's all the articles about the fucking restoration work that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is doing? Like, sure, maybe there are a bunch of fucking bums, but what organization is not full of a bunch of bums?
But like the only one who is left doing it now is Scorsese. I remember I saw one of the films I watched of these. It was like, thank you to Martin Scorsese for helping restore this film. And when
Yeah.
he goes away, my God, I'm going to be, talk about film news. There's stills from his newest Western, his new film. It's going to be a Western with DiCaprio. I kind
Oh, is
of
there?
can't wait for that. Yeah, I kind of can't wait for that. Very excited. I think it tells the story of Osage County in Oklahoma, famous land rights thing.
Huh.
But yeah, can't wait for that. So that's an aside. But yeah, I agree that.
Oh, well, I was going to say that's one thing is the supremacy of Hollywood. This idea that you have to cater things towards, absurdly cater things towards the taste of these tasteless producers who, are going to butcher your already compromised script even further and then probably not even make it.
Yeah.
That also even on the independent side of things, this slavish devotion to getting good looking shots above all else.
Yeah.
Eschewing character, eschewing emotion, just being like, we got to get this fancy ass camera with this fancy ass lens. This fear of looking unprofessional or looking not top of the range. Um, like Ozu's style, I would say, is the least show offish you can imagine.
Yeah, like it's not ostentatious in any way.
Yeah.
It's like I said, he reuses stuff all the time. It seems, but it's all beautiful. Like it's not to say it's not beautiful because it's gorgeous, especially when it's finally in color. To me, it's just
Yeah.
like so the saturation is
Well,
perfect.
that was the interesting thing about him and Kurosawa. Once they actually started working in color, you're like, oh, these guys are masters of color, just spontaneously.
Absolutely. Like I would love. There's that one Mizoguchi film that was in color.
Yeah.
I didn't watch it yet. But can you imagine Ugetsu in color? I think like it's great in black and white. I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, black and I'm not like a purist in that kind of way. I think it's all part of a technical progression, and I think that clearly, if a man like that could have made a film in color, it would have been even better. It could have been he could have expressed himself even more. Is all I mean.
Yeah.
You know, um, and yeah, like to talk about Hollywood stuff and beating that very alive but somehow dead horse.
Well, it's just like, where do we go? What can we take from these fellows, and where can we go with it? Like, I mean,
I think
I'm inclined towards historical stories anyway, so the Mizoguchi makes a lot of sense to me. But I would love to see somebody making just more domestic oriented stories, like just going and saying, well, I like Noah Baumbach does it, and I am a huge fan of Noah Baumbach, particularly his last film. But I guess we don't really appreciate those stories as much for some reason, and yet they're so prevalent in film history, I suppose, in all different parts of the world. Like Satyajit Ray did quite a few, just like stories of working people or stories of, city life and things like that. Like I said, Mike Lee is in that zone.
Mike
And
Lee's
yet,
very much in that zone. Yeah.
yeah, and yet none of like they're all very
Loach.
like none of them have this kind of low effort indie feel to them. Like they're all incredibly distinct voices, doing kind of the same. I guess you could say subject matter to a degree, or the same types of people, but just not doing like a kitchen sink style thing where it's just like we're just camera is whatever the camera's well like a typical Sundance type thing, I suppose, or where it's just like we've got this high contrast or sorry low contrast kind of little bit shaky handheld cam close up type thing where we're telling this story. uh I guess that's the aesthetic I imagine in my brain when I think of that done badly.
Yeah, like the idea that like a film I really enjoyed though, The Vast Tonight, was great for its long takes, and it's not like the camera movements were crazy ambitious or anything. It was just, I think it came down to necessity in a lot of ways, but it was still great. It wasn't like showy. It wasn't like, oh, look what we did. It's like, we're just going to rest here and listen to the characters talk, and we're going to have a nice frame, but they're going to speak to one another, and we're going to move, and it adds to the pace. And yeah, like I think I would like to see, someone try to do the Ozu way of, sitting in there, sitting in that frame, don't move
Well,
around, maybe hold it for a second.
Speaking of long unostentatious takes, have you watched any of Korean director Hong Sang-soo's movies?
I don't know.
He is incredibly prolific, but his films, I think his films on average might have like 30 or 40 shots in them. Usually it's like, well, here, let me see if I can find something. I've really struggled to find some of his later movies. One of his most common collaborators is his Kim Min Hee from The Handmaiden.
Okay, yeah.
I believe they had a extramarital affair, and now she's just in all of his movies.
Oh Christ, I know this director. Yeah, he's very famous. When I lived in China, I think I saw one of these films, but I can't recall which. I'm just looking at the filmography now. Was it Claire's Camera? No.
But now this is a guy. His shots are just like super simple, and like the long dialogue scenes, usually over alcohol of some description, usually over a few bottles of soju.
Bring on that soju. Yeah, like,
and this is like a digital camera, and like I've quite enjoyed some of his movies. Actually, what's her name? A French actress, the piano teacher. What's her name? Isabelle Huppert. She's in like a bunch of this guy's movies.
She's in the great Paul Verhoeven's what was that film that he made with her recently? Bizarre film. L, yeah. Wasn't my cup of tea, but I do respect Verhoeven. I'm a Starship Trooper stan, and a Total Recall stan. I think that's what the kids call it. I stand for those.
Oh, here it is. This is a classic Hong Sang-soo setup. Just the wide, like really super unostentatious shot. Just people sitting around drinking soju. I guess they are drinking wine, maybe. Looks like there's a wine bottle.
And I love if someone doesn't need, like what Mizoguchi kind of made me think about too, is how you don't need to close up all the fucking time. You don't need these, tight, like even that handheld shit you were talking about. I don't, fuck the handheld. Like I don't, so many people do it. You don't even need to anymore.
Well, it's a thing that I like in Blue Valentine that I noticed the first time, I think, where there's so much close up. Like almost every shot feels like a close up in that, and it feels like it almost feels like a cop out of directing. Because you're like, I'm not actually going to. I'm just going to like literally just have the camera on the actor's face, and you're just going to watch. Like they are going to give you everything.
Yeah.
You're not like they say Ozu was not. They say Ozu was not really an actor's director. Like that the process of actually, I think I had a quote here somewhere from Chishiryu where he talks about working with Ozu, where he's like, one day we did about 30 takes of this one shot, and by the end we didn't get it, so we just moved on.
Oh my god.
So,
man after my own heart, though. I don't mind a lot of takes.
Let me see. This might be. Oh yeah, this is it. Cameramen have to have something to photograph, and this is usually the actor. Yet, as has been mentioned, Ozu was not actor friendly. Of his later films, he once said, "You won't find any particularly new techniques except for the elimination of acting. When laughs and tears are as inflated as they are in most films today, trained monkeys could be perfectly adequate as actors. Actually, moments of joy and sorrow are times when we keep our emotion most to ourselves. I minimize the acting in my films because life is like this." Oh, this is the quote as well. From the actor's perspective, there are many horror stories. One of the least harrowing of which is that of Ryuchishu, so often the archetypal Ozu father. Once I followed Ozu's precise instructions more than 20 times, but each time I went before the camera, I failed to convey the proper feeling, and so we finally gave up.
Oh my god! Imagine how disheartening that would be. Like how just soul crushing as an actor to just know you're not good enough. It's like that story I heard about Fincher where he did the thing with Jake Gyllenhaal, and after like 50 takes, it's a digital camera. He just erased all the takes and was like, "Okay, we're gonna go again." And just you're just like, "Oh my god! Like, what am I supposed to do?" But
Zoom in's supposed to make the emotion feel larger than life, whereas pulling back makes it play out like you're simply witnessing it as you would if in the room. Yeah, that's the
little
Mizoguchi thing.
They say, yeah, Mizoguchi, and I guess
It's like the bigger the emotion, the character feels in a Mizoguchi movie, the further back the camera seems to be.
Yeah.
So the scene that I pulled up earlier of the woman having the mental breakdown is about as far away from her as you could be and still actually see her.
Like in the one I spoke about earlier with Chrysanthemums, you can't even see Otaku's face. Like she's just, you can kind of see it, but it's not like they're both just next to each other. It's like you're literally in the room just watching them from 8 to 10 feet away. And for like an American Canadian audience, you'd say like the Kubrick way versus the Spielberg way. Spielberg's all about getting in there and you're kind of feeling the character like you are them. Whereas a Kubrick, you're away and you're watching. Like that first scene in Barry Lyndon where we see his father get shot in the duel from behind the fence about 100 yards away or something, 50 yards away. And if I had to choose one or the other, I'm choosing the second one. I prefer that vastly. And well, it's also
to go back to that shot of the vase. It's just a part of like what it is that. Shout out to the nerd writer, but it's it's just this incredible precision in terms of like what he's trying to communicate with each, almost like with each second or with each possible decision you could make as a director. And so like this decision you see her smiling, she's like kind of wistfully thinking back on whatever, and then cutting away and then cutting back. It's like I feel like the fact, like my personal opinion on that cut would be that the vase itself is not meaningful. I think it's an aesthetic decision to show the vase. I think the fact of the cut is more important. I think he just wants to cut away and cut back, and that the vase is just, he likes the look of the vase. I think it's probably he just senses that this is the right decision to make. But the intention of the cut is something else. And I think that's what's up for debate with this cut, is like what does he want us to feel cutting away from this look and then cutting back? Because like if the fact that it's just an object, like he could have again cut back to the father, say. Like if he wanted to cut away, he could have just cut back to this shot and then cut back to her. But he decided to create this kind of like bit of air between the moments. So he obviously doesn't want us to be in her emotion. He wants us to witness it, and to acknowledge that she has had a change of her emotion. Yeah, what we don't see is always more powerful. We're left to fill in the emotion. Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, that goes back to what I was saying about Twin Peaks the other day. when he has that shot of them running out of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that quote is kind of insightful as to his whole kind of view on everything. He doesn't want to see her face change into that emotion. He doesn't want to see that, right? It's almost like he's cutting away out of like a decency thing. Like, I don't even want to see that. I want to come back here, and
It's
we're
like a
coming
modesty
back.
thing.
Well, not really that. I was being a little facetious there. It's just more like, you know, who knows how long the time has even passed between this phase. Like, is it really the time? Like, how long has she been looking away? Like, this is like time is not necessarily even a thing here. It's more like, let her be with her thoughts for a moment. We have this beautiful looking image. We come back and she's changed. And, you know, we didn't see that change. I don't think that, like you said, it's not really important. It's just important that now it's there. You know, I didn't really intellectualize this shot that much. I just kind of went with it. I kind of like I was interested about it, but I wasn't like, I'm very surprised to hear that this is such a debated thing to me. I think it's like kind of inconsequential. It's more the fact that it just, what's more important is how she feels to me, in this situation. Like, the most heartbreaking thing of this whole scene is when she's talking to her father and realizes he's asleep. Like, to me, that's the most important part of the scene, because she's like really gonna say something here, and he's fucking in bed. She might as well be talking to that vase. Is the vase
in the room with her? Well, it's unclear. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, another opinion put forward in this video essay is that it's an attempt to defer the emotional climax of the film. But then the video essay, or the person he's quoting in the video essay, says the next scene is the emotional climax, when she says, actually, I'm happy just as we are. This scene where he gives her the advice about, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, you'll learn to love your husband. You're just starting out on this new adventure. Whereas for me, like, I had my big emotional reaction when she thanks her father, when she's all dressed up in the ceremonial stuff, and she bows and thanks him for the years of, kind of a bit emotional just thinking about it. Just thanking him for the years of kindness or whatever.
Was it the father or the aunt kind of is the last one in the room, kind of walking around?
Oh yeah, she does the, like, it's like she's just checking to see if anything was forgotten and then walks out. But it also kind of looked like it might have been like a what do you call it?
It doesn't feel
like
though like it's
thing?
like it's another thing though that he kind of always goes to. Like, this is the last time she's like the aunt was looking around. I thought it was the father. It was the aunt. Looking around. Yeah. It's almost like this is the last time that we're all going to be in this room.
Yeah.
And like, you know, if she forgets something, like whatever is forgotten, that's it. That, like, when I pick that up and take it with me, that's the last piece of her that's ever going to be in here. And especially all of us together. And it's all wordless, of course. But the emotional climax for me is that. But I the most emotional part in the movie is clearly the end, when he's peeling the apple and the glistening eyes. Like, that gets me. But you're right too, in that moment when she's like thanking her father, but it feels like it's just like it's not real. Like, she's just saying that to save him, you know. But really, he's saving her by saying he's going to get married. It's very complicated emotion, which is just wonderful to see. And I can see why Mike Leigh loves him so much, because I think Mike Leigh is kind of a spiritual successor in a lot of ways. Some of his films, like Secrets and Lies, to me, is more heavily, I guess, plotted, kind of. There's more of a thing with the daughter being whatever and all that, but I feel like it's a similar kind of way of going about things.
Well, actually, talking about like the change in my feeling towards these movies, having lived in Asia, Noriko's accusing her old teacher, the guy who runs into her, of being basically being a dirty old man, and telling her that
being gross.
Basically telling him that she thinks it's disgusting that he's married, and they're both completely cheerful about it. That's such an East Asian thing. It's hilarious.
It is, and you know, that thing pops up in the reimagining that they did in Autumn. Is it Autumn Leaves or Autumn End of? Is it Autumn Ends? It might be Autumn Leaves, where Setsuko O'Hara plays the mother, and her daughter basically has the same spiel. She says, I think it's disgusting that she's going to get remarried. Have you forgotten my father? And it's kind of like, it's different in a way, because this one feels more like it's a betrayal of Setsuko and not the mother. But I feel like that later movie is kind of like, it's almost like he had to explain it a little bit more. Like, that it is that feeling of betraying of the parent and of the mother, and that memory, right? Of basically betraying of something that we all once had. You know, and it's another thing in these films. It's always like, you know, Our Last Trip and all that. It's like a family that maybe never was, perhaps. You know, like in was it Green Tea Over Rice? No, not Green Tea Over Rice. It was Equinox Flower, and they're gonna go on their final trip. You know, and it's just like, you know, they're talking about, oh, you always had to work, you always had to golf. So yeah, they went on trips, but a lot of the times the father wasn't even there. Like it's just this kind of thing that never really existed, maybe. And I don't know, these are questions kind of maybe that are left unanswered. It's something you got to infer on your own. And that's another thing I love, when they don't give you anything, when you've got to kind of make your own decisions about what it is. That's why, that's I think why I love this. I appreciate both of these guys so much, because Mizoguchi kind of gives there's definitely an opinion there. But with Ozu, it's just so open-ended to me in so many ways. You really got to fill in the blanks emotionally and intellectually. And it's awesome.
Like,
it's awesome.
Yeah, I'd watch his film sometime and wonder how much of a judgment he's casting on his characters. Like, particularly Tokyo Twilight, where he's getting into some real, like, dark topics.
Which is
it makes me wonder, like, does he cast judgment, or because it just feels to me to be very, like, actually myself and Alvi had a bit of a disagreement over Tokyo Story about whether the Kyoko Kagawa's character in that, who's very critical of her siblings for not spending the time with the father, or leaving so soon after the mother's funeral and stuff like that. Or no, sorry, it's not. It's actually Setsuko Hara's character in that. She's the one who like comes and spends time with the family, even though she's not. Yes, the daughter-in-law of the wife of their deceased son. Yeah, she's a different Noriko.
The Noriko trilogy. Yeah.
But myself and Alvi had a disagreement about whether Setsuko Hara was being portrayed as this morally good character. I felt like she was. It was kind of acknowledged that the adult children had very, like, the son, for example, is this constantly on call doctor in the neighborhood. Like he's shown basically not having a moment of rest. It's not like you see him just like hanging out in bars instead of hanging out with his family. You know, he's
not some negligent son. He's doing something for the community.
Whereas the daughter is like running this hair salon and stuff. So they're actually genuinely very busy, and they have their own families and stuff. And Setsuko Hara, you know, she admits as well in the movie that she spends, like, she can go weeks at a time without thinking of her dead husband.
No, it's
so, like, we had a disagreement. Alvi said that Setsuko Hara was being portrayed as being like this incredibly almost angelic, morally good character, whereas I felt like there was enough of a balance there that it was kind of been made clear that she just had the time to do it, to show that kind of care. Whereas like Kyoko Kagawa's character is so bitter towards her siblings, and yet the bitterness you feel almost stems from this knowledge that she too will be like this. Her widowed father.
And it's
so that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like the films all have this kind of, for me, moral ambiguity where I feel like this kind of, I don't know if it's a disconnect, like a cultural disconnect, where I don't get if he's being critical or not, or if he's just really leaving it open ended in that way.
I think some stuff he's openly being critical, but other stuff I think clearly from the subject matter. Like another thing, if you're going to boil it down to a couple words, it'd be like, that's life. Like, you know, things are going to be like, you're going to experience loss, and you're not always going to be close with that person, or that even your own family. Like eventually these ties kind of, even in the traditional society, they would eventually, like they said, the daughter would go away. You would lose these people. Like you lose, and no matter how close you are, even to the bitter end, you still die alone. That's an actual line in one of his films. So I think with these things, like I think he's kind of at the same time, like, has a what's the word I'm looking for? Nostalgia for some of this stuff, but also kind of sees through it. He sees through it, right? Like example in Tokyo Story, like Noriko being the daughter-in-law of the son, married to the son who passed away. That's very, even the fact that she's in there is kind of traditional thing. Like we talked about, the daughter would become part of the husband's family. So that's kind of on the surface looks like, oh, she's being good and traditional, but then she even admits, I just have time and I don't even think about him anymore, right? So it's a very like, non-traditional thing stuck in that traditional thing. And then, like you said, we think the kids are being kind of terrible, but really, no, they're not. They have these new responsibilities, and that doesn't mean they don't love their parents. It's just how it is, and it's how it is. It's how it kind of always how it's been in a lot of ways. So even though they had these strict systems and da 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 da, it really was all kind of maybe a facade in a way. Maybe it was never really there.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is why he's who he is. 500 people could watch that film and get probably 500 different opinions, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if we all watched, I don't know, Infinity War 2, I'm pretty sure we all know what was going on there. I don't know any people that selfless in real life. I stand by my innocent chair of lady. That's my favorite opinion. Okay, fair enough. I prefer your earlier take on the vase and the vase. I think that's very true. Sometimes people do, like I know, to go back to the vase comment that Alvy made that perhaps no one else can see. You get into a deep sadness, something terrible happens, and sometimes you'll I remember I grabbed a book, like a Lord of the Rings book, when a friend of mine died, and I just started reading the same thing over and over. And when I was done, I couldn't remember anything I read. It was just more to look at something that wasn't, my hands or the mirror or like anything, just to focus on something that really took me out of it, out of the moment I'm in for a second. But I guess I can still remember objects I stared at. Exactly. Yeah, it's something you do, I think. But to the other point, I disagree. You can anchor a poem.
Oh yeah, you can anchor a poem on one, and I guess that's the thing worth referencing here as well, is that Ozu was prolific in other areas as well. Like he fairly relentlessly wrote haikus, and he painted quite a lot. And I think that a lot of that, like composition, obviously being such an important part of his films, clear that he was a painter, and the overall tones and focuses of what he chooses to focus on kind of makes the haiku thing work. Like I think it seems like a lot of his movies, he came up with the dialogue first, and then would assign the dialogue to specific characters afterwards. So it was the line of dialogue that actually sparked the interest a lot of the time for him.
I love that.
It's just very particular, yeah.
I think I read he was a big drinker, which kind of comes across. And
oh yeah, I can't show it because the Criterion Channel has it blocked out. But there's a great photograph of him and his screenwriter Coco and oh fuck, oh god,
Yoda, his buddy there.
Oh lord, please.
I know his boy was named Yoda. Wasn't
I'm not that bad with Japanese names, but I do need Kogo Noda.
All names.
Yeah. Yeah, they used to go off to like a hut somewhere, an 8 tatami room, they said, and they would spend all their time writing and drinking bottles of
hot sake.
What is it? Sake, yeah.
Hot sake. Said, has to be warm.
He said this film was a 53 bottle sake bottle film, or this film was an 80 bottle. It was like he had his little diary that he kept, and he'd write like I think when they finished like Tokyo Story, say it would be like screenplay completed, 120 days, 70 bottles of sake.
Jesus.
And there's like photographs of like he would number all the bottles and line them up outside the room.
That's such a like college white boy, North America thing to do. I drink.
Oh, we used to do that. We used to have just a wall of cans.
Oh yeah,
but I mean we didn't have anything meaningful like a fucking screenplay out of it.
You didn't have Tokyo Story at the end, though,
no.
Unfortunately.
Something to take forward though.
How many craft beers will it take to write your next screenplay? Oh, only God can tell.
I mean, out of pure consideration for the person I live with, I will not be stacking empty beer cans anywhere.
Yeah, no, thank you. Haiku
Yeah,
usually
well-
pulls something simple into focus by simply describing. Great insight. I love the poetry insight we got in the chat. I'm such a damn Philistine. No, I love me some poetry.
Yeah, well, I think Ozu as well. I really appreciate this idea of dabbling in other art forms as a way to kind of get the creative juices flowing. To use an awful term.
Something you don't see anymore. Also, I think that's there's a dearth of that.
Well,
people
Lynch is a fella who makes relentlessly makes art.
Yeah, no, he's this is my film school, isn't that nice?
And actually, Laura Dern apparently said she recently went for a cappuccino with David Lynch, and that his new television series from Netflix is sounding very exciting.
Really?
Yeah.
He's like one guy. He just doesn't mind making a TV show, and we're almost. I think we have one episode left, and then we're going into the new ones, and I can't fucking wait.
Are you gonna watch?
Yes.
Are you gonna watch Firewalk with me?
Oh, of course, yeah, the movie.
Yeah.
But that I've seen. I just mean the new TV show.
Season 3,
my god. Oh my.
Well, anyway, will we wrap up our Ozu Mizoguchi chat?
Yeah.
I don't know. How do we wrap it up? Like, I feel like these guys, one of their kind of lasting influences as well is on the generation that followed them, which like you talked about the crowded frame of Mizoguchi and stuff. Like, I think one of the standout elements of the cinema of Shohei Umemura, who's one of my favorites, is these incredibly busy frames that he used to have. And he also was one who focused very heavily on real down and outs. Like, his film Insect Woman is about people who are literally on the bottom of society, like people living in the most rundown of the rundown huts, things like that. I'd say of the generation that followed these guys, Imamura is certainly my favorite.
He sounds like a child of Mizoguchi. In many ways.
I think so. I think he was. It's harder to see the DNA of Ozu in the films that came after. It feels like where you could take Mizoguchi and kind of run with him in a new way. Ozu's style was so distinct and so classical that all you could do was rebel against it if you had anything to say, almost. Because it was a style that kind of refined over time. So he didn't start off in the 20s making his movies look exactly like that, but he became more and more focused, more and more intimate, to the point that it's amazing to think of someone like Kurosawa as his contemporary, who was able to jump around so violently from story to story,
and from time period to time period. You see something like High and Low and compare it with, whatchamacallit, Throne of Blood. Okay, it's just two completely different things, but equally effective and equally amazing. But yeah, like Ozu is very much like, no one has ever tried to make something like that ever again. Do you know what I mean? That I can think of, like people. There's children of this person. We just said Mizoguchi. There's children of Kubrick. There's children of Bergman. Everybody tries to make fucking Persona or something, But like, I haven't seen any reduxes, let's say, or spiritual descendants rather of Ozu. Like I mentioned Mike Lee. Even he takes it. He doesn't take it to that same level. There's raw emotions in his films, like very raw. That is not present in a Yasujiro Ozu film.
Well, yeah, I guess what reminds me most of Ozu from Mike Lee's films is the incredible astuteness at the way communication between people is done in domestic situations. Like, I always think of that great scene in Meantime when the middle class aunt is trying to give Tim Roth's character a job to get him to do something, because he's just a completely incompetent person, and she wants to just give him the chance to come and work and earn some money for himself to get him. And his brother shows up instead after discouraging him from coming, and shows up to critique her, and she's like so annoyed and so upset, and yet she's just like, she's really not able to express the emotion in it, like just in a matter of fact way, you know. It's all about, well, I think you should have really asked him, you know. She's kind of, he's like spinning this yarn, and even though she knows he's bullshitting her, she has to communicate back to him on his terms. And
do this
yeah,
dance,
that whole
right?
thing of like that whole exchange between Setsuko Hara and her teacher is like the same thing for Japan, where it's like that is just such a familiar way of people from that part of the world communicating in those like low stakes domestic situations. So I guess that's one of the ways Ozu lives on.
The I guess a lack of like no qualms about talking about domestic life,
Yeah.
and seeing the universal and the simple, because he's the master of that. Honestly, he is. Mizoguchi, and I love him, but there's nothing simple about those stories. They're epically, although there's not much. There's really the only one with supernatural elements would be Ugetsu, but they're all deal with heavy themes, class and class war and mothers and fathers, and basically the failure of parents, the failure of society. These are very apparent in every fucking film. Whereas Ozu, yeah, it's just simple life, and still has those critiques. Oh, what is our troll fan saying? Seems to me like any good action it's true, very very true. You can teach all the technicalities in the world, but you cannot teach how to basically put it all, bleed out what you're feeling. And not many people can do it. No one can do it anymore. It's over.
I mean, I guess I love the contradiction more than anything of his appreciation for tradition. That tradition is important. It's part of our culture, and yet it's not going to save you. It's not gonna make you happy. It's not gonna, it just is. It's a thing to appreciate, and yet
it's fleeting, like a memory. It doesn't even really exist. You know what I mean? Like it's like you can hear it in the conversations. That's what's important. Those conversations between two people at a bar, or three friends, as they're trying to conspire to get some girl that they, their dead friend's daughter to get married. And it's really, what is it about? It's basically getting somebody to fall in, to just submit to this thing, because otherwise it's too uncertain or something. Maybe they tried and failed. Maybe they tried and failed and were promptly buried. I agree, Alvy. They were promptly buried.
the Ozu likes,
Yes. Anyone that tries to talk about domesticity. And one more thing though about American Hollywood films. I think that there is a real conscious effort to make sure that a certain class of people doesn't have films that are made about them, and they're actually now actively looked at as not exciting or boring or what have you. There's no Mike Lee in America. Maybe Sean Baker, I guess. He's trying his best, but few and far between, and I just hope there's more of that. And I'm starting to think more and more, maybe I gotta try to do something like that. Fuck genres.
Well, I mean, Canadian poverty, maybe one of the most underfilmed fucking things in North America.
That doesn't exist in Canadian film. We're just
Barely.
like, oh yeah, we're at the gas station. Let's get some dope.
Well, there was that film. What was it called? There was one that was actually done in the downtown east side not that long ago, but it looked like it was very much that Derek C. and Fran Stellar are talking about, it, low contrast, and it's just the expertise to really get the point across is not there. Where it just ends up being kind of like, you just get the impression that you're just going to watch something kind of miserable without any real artistry behind it.
Best episode yet, lads. Oh, thank you. Go to sleep, Alvy. Way past your bedtime. I don't know if I told you about the time I was down the east side and I saw a guy from my neck of the woods.
Oh yeah.
And I just heard his voice, and I was like, oh shit. We ended up chatting for a while, and he was like wearing these clothes. He clearly was out for a good night, and it turned into a bad week,
Yeah.
And I gave him, my buddy had cigarettes. I gave him cigarettes. I gave him $20, and he was off.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's like it's vivid in my mind, vivid, and I hope he's all right.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like I think films that try to maybe focus on it too much, maybe it's almost halfway poverty porn. Not okay. Not to say that it's focused on it too much, but sometimes it
Well, I
becomes
think
that, right?
that's what these films give us, and that's what I loved about. That's why I love about Imamura is that he delves even further into the filth than Mizoguchi does because he comes in a later era when it's more possible, and
Yeah.
like softcore pornography films became more popular in Japan in the '60s as well. So he kind of rode on the coattails of that. He's like, I'm gonna make these edgy movies that have like The Pornographers is one of his great ones.
Mm.
It's just about a guy who makes pornography basically. Um, but I feel like Mizoguchi leading into Imamura gives us such a great template for how to proceed in portraying poverty, in a way that is empathetic and in a way that's not, afraid to really show the ugly side of all of it. Because like Insect Woman is another one where, well, the pornographer is like, the guy is a horrible bastard. But also like Insect Woman, the people are they have so little capability of seeing the situation they're in and getting out of it. Like all they do is pass on their trauma generation to generation.
God damn.
And the thing about filmmaking is the way it is worked out, because there's so much money involved, even in extremely low budget stuff, there's still a lot of money involved. Like, you need to have some wealth, and you need to most likely be a person of a particular background to even be able to make a film. So if you're afraid to make a film about poverty because you yourself do not come from like a background of poverty, it kind of ruins the potential of the art form in a way. Whereas, on the flip side of that, we've all seen the terrible films about homeless people that people just make because they're like, I'm going to make an issue movie.
Yeah, and that's like no, it can't exist. It's just exploitation to me.
There's no benefit to it at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. Although a film I loved a lot recently. I don't know if you like this one. It's a Japanese film, The Shoplifters. Did you like that film?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like I find Korida is, for some reason, he never penetrates to the next level. His films never kind of break through. They're always like enjoyable and good. And yet I never get to the point with his films where I'm like, this is, next level excellent. And I don't know what it is. I've watched a bunch of his movies. Like I've watched I Wish, I watched Nobody Knows, After the Storm. Like usually he tends to be present at every film festival. So every film festival I've been to, I go see one of his movies. I don't know what it is. It's a strange one where I just like, I think Shoplifters was probably the best of them.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to watch that again because when I did go see it, we ended up going in very late, so I ended up sitting in the fucking front row watching the movie like this.
That's like the first time I saw Mad Max. I was in the front row and I was like, okay, cool. And then I saw it again and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
This is actually, I can see what they're talking. This is the General. Okay, this is Buster Keaton redone.
Yeah.
This is amazing. But yeah, seating. That's the one thing about a theater. Seating matters. Seating fucking matters.
Big time.
But yeah, Shoplifters is like, I did enjoy it a lot. I thought it was great, but it didn't like, it hooked me for sure. Like I was like, okay, I'm feeling this film, but it didn't break me. Like I think a film like that should, like when I watched.
I think it sounds like we have similar reactions.
Yeah, but it's hard. There's not many, like a lot of modern films are kind of few and far between, like I said before. But Baker's good at that. I really love the Thornton Project. I didn't think that was poverty porn, minus the little Disney part at the end, which is kind of heavy-handed. I thought otherwise it was well performed and well shot, and it was. It wasn't that. It wasn't just exploitation. I don't think.
No.
I think it was honest portrayal.
Yeah.
Of life.
But yeah, like this era. I mean, the '50s for me is my favorite film era. in Hollywood, probably in France, also in Japan, because it was really the height of the industry, the height of the art form. It was long enough from the establishment of the form that people had really figured out how to work it and make it work, and go beyond the norm. But before the decay set in.
Yeah, like 50s Hollywood, my God. I love the 40s too, because Preston Sturges is one of my faves, and he made some great stuff in the 40s, and obviously Citizen Kane, and then Maltese Falcon. These are like 40s, 50s to me, and then but the 50s has all my favorite Billy Wilder films, and Billy Wilder, from Double Indemnity down to The Apartment. That's 62, I think, but it's kind of
No,
like
The
it's funny,
Apartment
like
is
these
1960. It's basically like a late 50s movie.
late 50s. Okay, like Goodfellas is like the end of the night. It's 1990, but it's really like the late 80s to me.
Yeah.
Because it encapsulates that era, right? But yeah, like it's funny how you said that earlier, how you kind of lump in like from the silent era into the 60s. I kind of do the same, oddly enough. But I think my favorite era is like, I guess 70s, because I got my Altman in there and my Hal Ashby, who I love, and then Coppola's best work, and then Taxi Driver.
I guess I just see a real
Brian De
distinct
Palma.
break. Yeah. Like actually Eric Romer is one of those guys who kind of epitomizes it for me, because you watch La Collection Is, and it's crazy to think that it was filmed before My Night at Maud's, because My Night at Maud's looks like a late 50s movie or an early 60s movie, whereas La Collection Is looks like a late, like what you would think a late 60s movie should look like.
On that note,
yeah. So yeah, 2 weeks time we're coming back to talk about Romer.
Hell yeah.
Taking a week off because I'm turning fucking another year older. Second pandemic birthday celebration. Very exciting times.
Woo!
Yeah. Yeah, this came.
Hey, are you doing that on Tuesday?
So I think, yeah, I'm gonna make a stab at doing the script to screen comparison of Jurassic Park. I'll aim to get like halfway through the movie, I'd say, and then do the other half the following week.
Yeah.
So that's that. But yeah, in 2 weeks' time, we're coming back. We're going to talk about Romer. Most likely Claire's knee.
Yeah, I think we said Claire's knee, but if we change, we change.
Yeah, I'd say Claire's knee, but I wanted to take the opportunity to watch some of those season films. I've only seen Summer, Le Conte d'Été. I haven't seen the other
I've
ones.
only seen like 6 Romer films or 7, and he's got like 30, so I've got to watch like another 10. I'm stoked though. I can't wait to go through like just a rush of films here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I keep playing fucking catch up with these shows. Every time we talk about a director, I'm like, oh, now I want to watch all their stuff. Like we did Altman. When did we do fucking Altman? Like 3 weeks ago.
A month ago, 4 weeks.
And like last weekend, I was like, Nashville. I'm ready for Nashville now again. And I'm still watching Tanner 88. So.
Oh well, Altman, he's got so much work, it takes a while. But he's one guy of all those 70s guys. I go back and rewatch his films more than anybody. And Hal Ashby is another one that I know you don't really connect with, but The Last Detail I think is on Criterion, which is a personal, like it's not the best film in the world. It's not whatever, but it has a place in my heart. Jack Nicholson and Randy Quaid, and it's good. It's a good film, and I love Hal Ashby. But anyway, yeah, Altman. How can you not want to watch? I could watch a movie of his every week until I'm dead.
Well, you're talking about people making their Bergman movies. I mean, Altman made a share of Bergman movies between Images and Three Women.
Yeah, Three
And
Women.
then Altman went on to influence PTA, who made his share of Altman movies, with Magnolia being probably the most obvious one, but also Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights, for sure. But now he's his own man. Now he's just doing his own thing to me,
Oh, yeah.
There Will Be Blood. We got to talk about him one of these weeks.
Yeah, I want to do Magnolia. I want to rewatch Magnolia. Been on my list 100%. For a while.
And there's that great documentary on YouTube you should check out, just the filming of and the pre-production.
Oh.
It's on YouTube for free. It's an hour.
I've seen some clips of him behind the scenes. He looks like a bit of a lunatic. It's pretty funny in that era.
He is, but you know what? You can't even watching that documentary. You can't help but want to be on that film. Like, just be there. you just can't help but be like, this looks like a person a magnetism, you know, something that just is very apparent in his films. I think.
Yeah.
That same spirit.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice to do Magnolia and kind of also, I suppose, see if we could track down a copy of Shortcuts, because I think that's probably the most. I mean, there's very direct correlations between Magnolia and Shortcuts,
Oh,
between
very
the
much.
earthquake and
California.
the apocalyptic event.
Yeah.
In Magnolia.
Shortcuts. Oh, I mean, yeah, out of the sky. I don't want to say any more. I mean, everybody's seen it. Bloody amphibians.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. Can't believe that.
22 years ago. Holy moly.
Getting old, man. Jesus Christ. And you're
Yeah.
going to have that marker pretty soon.
Well, anyway, nonetheless, that's that. Yeah, I mean, I say we'll definitely, at some point, we're going to have an opportunity to go back to these directors and even this era in Japanese cinema. Like Mikio Naruse is another one from this era who I'm a big fan of. He's often lumped in with Ozu because he also does quite domestic oriented stories, and also worked with Setsuko Hara from time to time. I believe they made a Repast together, which is another story about a woman who leaves her husband and spends the entire movie being told that she needs to go back to her husband.
Of course.
But yeah, Naruse is great. I really like Naruse, and there's Kinoshita is another director this era who made some great stuff like The Ballad of Narayama, which is a great film. Mostly done. There's a lot of these Japanese movies, and Mishima, Paul Schrader's one, is kind of an homage to it. That they built these elaborate sets, and actually the boat sequence in Ugetsu is a set of this type, where it's just like a crazy set where it's just like a boat and just a shit ton of water, and then like a sky and fog.
That's one thing
they
I didn't even
do
mention
these
about
incredibly. A lot of these films do this incredibly ornate sets. And Ballad of Narayama is one. And actually, Ballad of Narayama was remade much later by Imamura, the great Imamura. But Kinoshita did the original about time in Japanese history, a mythological time, I believe, when people reach a certain age, they are carried up to a mountain to die.
Whoa.
So that's a great one. And all this stuff's on Criterion. Like, the Criterion channel is this unbelievable fucking goldmine for Japanese cinema, and I'm so pleased.
Like, everything I've watched the last couple of weeks is all from my Criterion subscription. Thank God for the Criterion collection. And all, like, those filmmakers you mentioned, I've read about them and stuff, but I haven't seen any of their films yet. So now I have the chance to. I can't wait. I'm going to go visit some of these lads. I think I've seen Imamura, but the other two you mentioned, I've read about them in conjunction with this time period of Japanese filmmaking. I think the one, what did you call him?
Naruse?
Yeah, I think he's married to one of the actresses in one of these films, or at least it was his partner.
Maybe.
I don't know where I get this information.
Once you get past Ozu and the likes of them, you're starting to deal with the directors who had a bit less control over the films they made, and yet a lot of them are still very well regarded movies. You know, it's the same thing happens in Hollywood. Like, the problem is never that producers are just absolutely incompetent all the time. Like, the producer-led stuff also produced some great works. And yeah, the more you like, the ones in the West who are really idolized, I suppose, are the ones who just kind of had carte blanche. But there's other stuff there. Like, it was an incredibly rich period for cinema, all over the world,
Around the world. Yeah. No, it's Hitchcock, for crying out loud. Like, his best work is in the 50s for me. Like, I
kind of wanted
naming.
I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how the correlations for me between Ozu and Hitchcock, but I think we can get to that a different day.
We'll do that on our Hitchcock day, I guess, because we're going to talk about him. We got to talk about him.
Most likely, yes.
Do Rope. No, I will do something else. But I do like Rope.
We'll figure it out. All right.
Technical innovation. Yes. Have a good weekend.
We're done.
World.
We're gonna... Hold on a sec. How do I do shit again?
Oh,
I have to go... Oh.
Ow.
All right. Okay, we're gonna end this.
And
go to creator, dashboard, stream manager.
Hell yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. We're gonna hit the road. Get the hell out of here. And so long. So on. Bye. Thanks for listening.
Nay.